Oh, yes. Welcome to East Lansing City Council regular meeting, Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. I'll call this meeting to order. We'll begin with roll call.
Councilmember Babcock.
Present.
Councilmember Brookover.
Here.
Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
Here.
Mayor Bacon.
Present. Next up, I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes for City Council Special Budget Work Session, May 10th, 2022, Regular Council, May 10th, 2022, City Council Special Budget Work Session, May 17th, 2022, City Council Discussion Only Meeting, May 17th, 2022.
Motion
So
to
moved.
approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All written communication received by council are posted to the online agenda packet. That's all written communication received before 4 p.m. Should be present there. Next up, I'll look for communication from the audience. I only have one blue slip here. If there's any others, feel free to approach and just fill out the blue slip later. First up, last name Cannon.
Good evening. My name is Janelle Cannon, and I serve on the Housing Commission and also on the Age-Friendly Community Steering Committee. And I wanted to offer some comments regarding the discussion of housing that took place at your previous meeting. And I want to ask you to reconsider your opinion about Mr. Menzer and Mr. Fehrenbach requesting an expert to come in and help us vision what would be a good fit on the northern tier property. I understand that you're not pleased with the housing study that we have. I do think that it does offer some valuable information. What that study told us was who lives here now. It also told us who could live here if we had appropriate housing, especially for those with lower and middle incomes. For some reason, we have to start calling that attainable housing now instead of affordable. I don't know if that's because regular average white folk now are having trouble finding housing, but I'm here to tell you we do have a crisis, and it deserves serious consideration. We have had many discussions in housing and also on the Planning Commission about types of new housing. And when they expressed some of those desires to help us vision that, what they were told was, well, don't you have that in-house expertise? And their answer was no. And they were told, well, get some volunteers together. You know, go out, get some realtors, get some developers. Well, I don't think that offers serious consideration to what we're trying to do, and that doesn't include the public. You know, saying that it's easy to just go build some single-family homes there, it isn't easy. Developers don't want to build smaller homes. And that doesn't address the issue of low volumes of available housing. So how do we get to increased numbers of adequate housing? If you look at that study, she names several things that are in there that we can gravitate to. I also wrote you a letter on November 24th, similar to what we're talking about in the Northern Tier. Thank you, Mayor Bacon, for acknowledging my letter. When volunteers get together, they do need somebody with expert knowledge and credentials to help shape what we need. We know that housing for low and moderate incomes does not mean low class. It just means affordable for the average person. So I did seek out some advice from a realtor that is a dear friend of mine. In the last 5 years, she has sold multiples of millions of real estate in the greater Lansing area. And I talked to her about the Northern Tier property. And she said, well, you know, we're missing the boat when it comes to creating higher density affordable housing. She said, I would put a multi-level condo on that property. We're talking about units of 2, 3, 5, 800 square feet. The imagination and the creativity in the built-in environment is amazing. And that's what this expert could help us all understand. And you build it around a courtyard that the residents would use. You know, they would have space for bocce ball and a horseshoe pit. An open patio where you could have a fire pit in the summertime and maybe a Christmas tree in the wintertime. And the outside of the building would serve as a buffer for the noise against the highway. So there are ideas out there, and I hope you will support Mr. Menzer and Mr. Fehrenbach as they seek to help us, the public, decide what kind of housing we want here in East Lansing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Julie Barron, and I want to speak regarding, under the business agenda 6.5, the resolution and discussion of entheogenic plants and fungi. I am on the National Board of Decriminalized Nature, and I'm the co-director of Decriminalized Nature Michigan, and we have been working with cities all throughout the U.S. and also here where I live in Michigan to decriminalize these substances. As a therapist, I see people every day at the end of their rope trying to get help from terrible suffering from treatment-resistant depression, addiction, anxiety, PTSD. Rates of these things are only on the rise. There is an unbelievable high spike in suicide deaths and deaths from drug overdose, and these things are only getting more and more. Entheogenic plants and fungi, things like psilocybin mushrooms, iboga, ayahuasca, mescaline-containing cacti like San Pedro or peyote, have been found to be in clinical studies and in clinics really effective remedies for these things. I see clients in my practice every day who've been through Western medicine with no hope for ending their treatment-resistant depression or symptoms of PTSD, and they find a rare ray of hope in these substances, and they are quite effective. This resolution is about restoring our connection to ourselves and restoring our connection to nature. We're talking about substances that grow from the ground. Our ancestors have used these plants and fungi. Western society has sadly discarded them and pushed them to the side. In the 14 cities across the U.S. that have decriminalized, including Ann Arbor, Michigan, Hazel Park, Michigan, and Detroit, Michigan, there have been 0 reports of increased crime or problems due to these substances. And we're now looking at 3 years now, which the first city passed, which was Denver was the first city to decriminalize mushrooms, and then Oakland, California followed with all entheogenic plants. So we asked the city of East Lansing to help eliminate the fear of people who want to use these substances for spiritual practice or for healing. And we're asking you to make it the lowest law enforcement priority for the city, and if possible, to eliminate funding for arrest and prosecution of these substances. thank you very much for your time. And thank you, Dana Watson, for championing this resolution.
Thank you. Yep.
Hello, my name is Ben Chandler, and I'm also speaking regarding the resolution on entheogenic plants and fungi. You've all heard from me at least once on this issue, but I'll again tell you that I would not be alive, at least not as a functioning member of society, if it weren't for the life-saving grace of entheogenic medicines and the inner work that they've allowed me to do. I understand you have some concerns about passing this resolution. You may feel like it's not your place to put forth this policy, but each of our personal relationships to the natural world should be no one's authority but our own, especially when we're not harming or posing a threat to others and are often becoming better citizens at the same time. Police have the ability to exercise a degree of discretion in the cases they deal with, and this resolution would encourage them to exercise this discretion in cases dealing solely with entheogen possession and practices. But if some other alleged crime takes place in addition, then the resolution, of course, does not limit them from taking action on the basis of that alleged crime. I implore you to consider an amendment to the resolution similar to Hazel Park's that restricts city funding from going toward policing entheogenic plant possession and practices, which would ensure that this resolution serves a meaningful function. We already have laws in place that take care of public disturbance, driving under the influence, or anything that would otherwise be a concern for public safety. There are many people using these medicines for healing and spiritual purposes, as they have been for thousands of years on this continent, and they do not deserve to be unjustly arrested or prosecuted. I agree with Washtenaw County Prosecutor Ellie Savitt, who in his 2021 policy directive to no longer prosecute cases of entheogen possession and use said, quote, "Prosecuting entheogenic plant use or possession is not in the interest of justice," end quote. These plants and mushrooms, some of which are even possible to find growing in our own backyards, do not pose a significant risk of fatal overdose. They're non-addictive, they can even treat addiction, and furthermore, they're not associated with violence, and over the long term, studies show that entheogen use is associated with decreased violence and decreased odds of committing violent crimes. The Ingham County Prosecutor's Office has routinely diverted entheogen possession cases over the past several years, so this resolution would not be wildly at odds with the current practices in this county. There's a bill in the state Senate and a ballot initiative collecting signatures to accomplish what we're trying to do here, but we should not discount East Lansing's opportunity to be a part of this movement as a leader for human rights and cognitive and religious liberty. The medicalization and commercialization of these medicines is inevitable and may come sooner than we all think. This is a good thing, as many people will gain access to the healing benefits of these medicines, but it also creates another set of issues. With powerful special interests involved and legislators complacent that people, at least people with great insurance, will have access to the medicines, the main point at issue here will remain unresolved, which is the ability for humans to exercise their inalienable right to a personal relationship with nature, spirituality, and healing without an authority stepping in when it is not necessary and even harmful to do so. It is imperative to protect personal and ceremonial use of entheogens with local resolutions to avoid a scenario where this beautiful opportunity for natural, sustained healing remains gated by the interests of capitalism. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Nice to see you again. My name is Kat Ebert, and I'm the chair of the Board of Directors of Students for Sensible Drug Policy, the largest youth-led drug policy organization in the world. I have already shared my story and some facts and supporting evidence for my stance on supporting the resolution on entheogenic plants and fungi. But I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach today. So we live in a very scary time right now for a lot of different reasons. But we live in a state where the bodily autonomy of people with uteruses is under attack right now. And while this is not directly related, this falls under bodily autonomy. And so I come to you today as a pleasure activist, a drug policy activist, and a bodily autonomy activist. And I urge you to please consider to vote in support of this resolution. I also urge you to please, if possible, remove funding from the police department for arrest, incarceration, and prosecution. And I'm going to keep it short and sweet today, but I thank you for your time and your consideration, and yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Cody Moore. I'm also speaking in regards to entheogenic plants and fungi. I live on 5103 East Brookfield Lane here in East Lansing. I worked for 3 years at the MSU Recycling Center. I graduated with a computer science degree at MSU in 2019. I undertook a year of AmeriCorps service through the Ingham County Land Bank's garden program in support of community gardens and urban farmers, and am generally invested in being the force of positive change I wish to see within the communities I participate in. This is why I now stand before you today to speak upon an issue I find most imperative. I stand in full support of decriminalized nature mid-Michigan, as I supported decriminalized nature Ann Arbor since its first community meeting, and continue to support similar movements on the local and state levels. The access to naturally occurring compounds that promote neuroplasticity, soothe mental health ailments, provoke a sense of connection with life around us, and expand our consciousness and awareness is a pivotal point in any plan that hopes to mitigate and transcend the systemic problems we see in our society today. We cannot possibly hope to overcome the crippling ailments of our world if we as a people are locked into individual and collective loops of depression, anxiety, hatred, destruction, and pursuit of greed. Naturally occurring entheogens are a liberating tool that the earth is providing to us to help us take a step back from the deep-rooted loops of hate, division, destruction, and dissonance that we find our communities in today, and a step towards harmony with each other and our planet. Towards realizing that the game we're playing now is not the only game that can be played. The fact that possessing or consuming one of these naturally occurring entheogenic substances can lead to being put on parole or in jail is a relic of policies crafted in the spirit of fear and division. What we have on the table for discussion today is an undoing of those wrongs. I implore you, people of the council, as a fellow human cohabitating this community with you, to take this most vital of steps forward towards a better, more harmonic, more loving future. Decriminalize natural entheogens and stop the persecution of those using them in their tool belt of constructive problem solving. Entheogenic experiences played a fundamental role in me becoming a more open-hearted, open-minded, action-oriented, and understanding person, and I hope we can all be in agreement that the world needs more of that. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Ben Schuldiner. I'm the Superintendent of Schools for the Lansing School District. The irony of talking after people asking about mushrooms is not lost on a school superintendent, but you know, I think it's fascinating that this is what you guys do here in East Lansing. I love it. I wish we had more people coming to our school board meetings and we could fill a room like you do.
Welcome to East Lansing.
Oh, thank you. It's nice to see you. You know, I'm here because I got a letter in the mail that said that you're making a decision about giving some tax breaks to some folks that are going to be spending time in East Lansing, but it's school district property, I guess. I mean, hey, what am I supposed to say? I'd like to get that money rather than you giving it as tax breaks. You know, I'm a school superintendent. We believe that certainly money should go to the schools, and we appreciate, you know, the idea of incentivizing businesses. But, you know, I would just ask, you know, what's in it for us, right? You know, the trickle-down neoliberal ideal of trying to give money to companies so that they would come into a community and do things I completely understand, but I'm paid by the good people of Lansing to make the best schools possible. And we all know that money actually matters. So, I think on this agenda, again, I got a letter in the mail that said to come to 410, and then I found something on a piece of paper that said I was supposed to come here. Very nice room, by the way. But I just want to urge everybody on the council that when you make these decisions about tax breaks, it really does affect kids. And I'd really like to just make sure that the question always is, well, what's in it for us? Yes, jobs, sure, but I don't know how that affects a kindergarten kid that we're teaching. Having a nice building that are causing things to happen in East Lansing, that's great, but how many of them are really going to send their kids to Lansing? I don't know. Make that part of the deal. I'd love that. We'll give you tax breaks if you send 50% of your kids to the Lansing School District. Probably not part of the deal, though. So I would just ask that when we consider things like tax breaks and abatements that affect the school districts in Lansing, that we at least have a conversation of say, okay, fine, but what will you do? Maybe mentoring programs, maybe a new basketball court. I don't really know, but those are the kinds of conversations I just hope us as public entities have. It shouldn't just be a fait accompli where we say, oh, great, we're going to give you tax breaks or tax credits because you're going to come in and have businesses here. That's fine, but other people have businesses here too and they pay their taxes. And so we just want to make sure that from this weird interscene issue where it's, I guess, land in East Lansing, but it's actually part of the Lansing School District and it would be affecting our tax base and it would be affecting the money that comes to the schools. I just ask that when we have these conversations, this is probably going to be one of many, but it's the first one that I saw, and that's why I'm here, is that we just really ask again, if as public servants, our job is to the public, and my job as a superintendent is to the students, what is it that we can ask that the students should be getting that they won't because these tax breaks are being given to corporations? Again, I'm glad they're coming in. I'm bringing jobs. It's going to bring in tax revenue for everybody here, but I don't see how this affects that third grader at Rio. And so I just want to make sure that we continue to always ask those questions. There's no harm. But if and when you do vote for this, I would ask that you say, okay, great, what are you going to do for the Lansing school districts? Because we just allowed it so that you don't pay taxes for them. Or at least it's, I think, a 10-year abatement or something like that. So again, 10 years from now, I'm sure there's some kid that's in kindergarten that will then be in 9th grade, and that'll be great for that kid. But all the other kids in the next 10 years, I would just want to make sure that we at least have a conversation about how it can be benefit to our kids. So with that, you should never give me 5 minutes. I would take it all. But I really appreciate the time here. And, if I can ever be of service as a superintendent down the street, I think there's a lot that we can do together. But again, the tax base does affect us. It impacts us greatly. It allows everything from teacher salaries to books and to better schools. So thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rick Frankfort. I live at 1044 Sunset Lane, about 2 blocks right behind the building here. I own a business here in town. I'm a businessman, and my business is Medical Management Systems. We're located on Lake Lansing Road, and we've been doing your ambulance billing for the last 28 years, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about that. Your ambulance billing this year, we are up $350,000 in revenue. That's a 50% increase over where we were last year at the same time period. That's unheard of. Our accounts receivable looks great. In the last 28 years, I've collected over $25 million for the city of East Lansing. I employ people all over the city. I want to keep these jobs. I want to keep your business, and that's the reason I came tonight. It was my understanding it was on the agenda that you're going to be talking about this. In 28 years, I've worked hard for your company. We've tried to do everything we do very ethically, working with your patients, treating them with respect, but also getting our job done of collecting money. So it came as kind of a shock to me when I received this letter yesterday that our services were being terminated. I don't know of a single reason why we would be terminated at this point, so I was kind of blindsided. I really want to keep your business. I want to work hard to keep your business, and I hope you'll listen to me in the coming weeks. Because I do think it's important. We offer a very valuable service to the city of East Lansing that's generated a great deal of revenue. So at least I'd like to know why we're being let go after 28 years. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate your business. Thank you.
Thank you.
One other thing I just wanted to show you real quick. That's a diagram of what we've done in the last 12 years, and it's going straight up. So if you look at the revenue, which is the top line, that's what we've done for 12 years for you. And our numbers speak for themselves. I think that's what we should be graded on. Thank you.
Any more in-person comment? Anyone in the online queue?
Yep, we have a few attendees in the online queue. I'll start with the caller with the name L. You are now welcome to address the council.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Dear Mayor and esteemed City Council members, I'm speaking regarding the resolution about entheogenic plants and fungi, which is item 6.5 of the agenda. I'm a Michigan resident. I'm speaking anonymously, both because of the current illegality of psychedelics and the personal tenor of this email. Use of psychedelics in my 20s saved my life. I went from being a reckless and lost young woman who grew up in a violent and cruel home to one who found her place in the world, found love, got married, and has been working happily for a Southeast Michigan nonprofit for the better part of a decade, contributing to the betterment of our communities. While, of course, there were a number of factors that allowed for this unexpectedly fortunate trajectory, none of my subsequent successes would have occurred without my first trip. I had spent my entire adolescence with suicidal ideation. After my first trip, that was gone. It was literally suddenly no longer there. It was the first time I had ever felt deeply that perhaps I did not need to die, and that became the foundation on which I have been able to build my life. I acknowledge this is a heavy topic for a city council. I'm speaking it, though, because I want you to know that the efforts to decriminalize psychedelics is an unfrivolous one. Psychedelics help attenuate decades-long mental health issues, they help transform post-traumatic stress disorder in our veterans, and they help people end their substance use disorders, sometimes with just one use. Psychedelics saved my life and changed it. People worry substances like these will make people non-contributing members of society, but overwhelmingly we hear and see the opposite. Psychedelics take people who didn't know how they would get through their days and allow those people to come alive in ways that were not only previously closed off to them, but invisible. Psychedelics transform these people for the better. You have a unique opportunity to allow people to rejoin the world through decriminalization of psychedelics. You can help make it so that they're not afraid of a life-ruining felony in the process, which of course tend to impact communities of color and impoverished communities the heaviest. This speech is in support of you voting aye when the proposal to decriminalize psychedelics in East Lansing comes up for a vote. Even Councilmember Luke Londo in Hazel Park spoke about how psychedelics helped him treat his depression before Hazel Park ultimately passed a similar resolution in March of this year. Councilmember Londo's story is just another example of how psychedelics do not render people incapable, but rather render them capable. What we were told psychedelics do is the opposite of what they do. The evidence would be all around us if it were not legally unsafe to speak about it. Thank you for your time, service to East Lansing, and for your consideration.
Thank you.
Caller with the name Decriminalize Nature, you are now welcome to address the council.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Hello, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is actually Larry Norris. I have my Zoom. I guess it tells you exactly what we're doing here today. So thank you very much to Councilmember Watson for having the courage to introduce this very important resolution, Agenda 6.5, related to entheogenic plants and fungi. And thank you to the East Lansing City Council for your consideration. My name is Dr. Larry Norris. I grew up in the Metro Detroit area and am a University of Michigan Ann Arbor alum, but don't hold that against me. I graduated with a degree in biopsychology and cognitive neuroscience in 1998. I currently live in the San Francisco Bay Area and just received my doctorate on ayahuasca experiences, one of the plants on the resolution, and integration, or basically how do you make meaning or support the individual. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit called Entheogenic Research, Integration, and Education, which provides education and integration services to the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm also the co-founder of Decriminalize Nature National, which began in Oakland, California, and passed this resolution in June of 2019 unanimously. And I've been offering support to the incredible Decriminalize Nature East Lansing Mid-Michigan team. As you've already heard today, entheogenic or psychedelic plants and fungi are being researched for a multitude of mental health conditions, such as substance use disorder, depression, and end-of-life anxiety, as well as for improvements in general well-being through personal and spiritual growth. A Johns Hopkins study from 2009 demonstrates these psychedelics are not only beneficial for mental health conditions, but also what they called healthy normals, where over 70% of the respondents said it was one of the top 5 most meaningful experiences of their lives. But we shouldn't have to wait for clinical or FDA trials to complete or venture capital companies to monopolize these medicines before having access to plants and fungi that have been used for centuries, if not millennia, by cultures across the globe. We really see decriminalization as a risk reduction strategy. Those who are already having experiences can feel safe to find the support they may need. Those who are new to entheogens will be able to educate themselves within community on safe and responsible practices. As more and more scientific research and media talk about the benefits of entheogens, people will naturally want to see what this is all about. Rather than perpetuate a system causing fear and anxiety about police encounters, perhaps it is time to try another approach, one that honors the self-agency and sovereignty of adults and the unalienable right to have their own relationship with nature. And city councils across the U.S. agree. Now 14 locations across the U.S. have passed resolutions that de facto decriminalizes these plants and fungi through a process of deprioritizing law enforcement around entheogens and restricting any funding towards investigation, persecution, and arrest of individuals engaging in entheogenic practices. Something that we were told in Oakland is that they actually preferred both of those at the same time because it reduces confusion and on-the-spot sort of spontaneous arrests. They know already this is not something that they're going to go after. And this is a statement by the city councils across the U.S. that they are ready to move forward and stop these failed policies around substances and help figure out new ways to community health. This message is resonating, and we have received unanimous decisions in almost all of the cities. In 2 of the cities who proposed ballot initiatives, Washington, D.C. had 76% voter approval, and Detroit, Michigan had 61% voter approval. It is important to note that Michigan is currently leading the way with related policy, passing in Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County, Detroit, Hazel Park, as well as support to decriminalizing Grand Rapids, and incredible upcoming momentum in Ferndale, Kalamazoo, and other cities, as well as statewide ballot initiatives and legislation proposed by Decriminalize Nature Michigan team. Outside of Michigan, there are currently Decriminalize Nature teams active in over 50 cities, and both you and East Lansing and Missoula, Montana City Council are hearing this issue over the next month. It has been quite a journey over the last 3 years since Oakland, California decriminalized entheogenic plants and fungi. As Julie mentioned earlier, to date, there have been 0 reports of instances such as driving under the influence, being on school property, increases in crime, or any other negative news. In fact, just the opposite. There are incredible stories of healing in these communities. Instead of focusing on the past fear-based mythologies and propaganda about entheogens, we can instead base our inquiry from a place of love and compassion. How could these heal our communities? How could these help the mental health of East Lansing citizens? How much could it encourage personal and spiritual growth? This is what the science, millennia of indigenous tradition, and the strong underground entheogenic community already existing in East Lansing and across the U.S. are telling us. East Lansing can be a leader in this movement and deserves to be on the right side of the history as one of the first 15 cities to end these policies, which prohibits sacred healing plants and mushrooms. I would be happy to answer any questions you have on these topics. Thank you, Decriminalize Nature Mid-Michigan, Councilmember Watson, and the East Lansing City Council for considering this resolution. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Caller Brad Willett, you are now welcome to address the council.
I apologize. I didn't realize I was going to be called on. I was witnessing the festivities from my remote location, but I could briefly in support of the entheogenic measure that was referenced. I will I'll leave it there.
Caller with the phone number ending in 552, you are now welcome to address the council. You may need to.
Hello. A lot of feedback. Hang on. Hi, Kath Edsel, 1026 Daisy Lane. Member of the East Lansing Independent Police Oversight Commission, as well as an East Lansing School Board member. I'm glad I called in tonight because I've learned a great deal on a number of issues that I'll comment on before I make the comments I intended to make, which is I fully support the resolution that has been spoken about a number of times tonight, even though I personally have no interest in psychedelics. I believe that, as these individuals have said, and I've read in literature, provides a great deal of benefit for many people struggling with issues for which traditional medicine doesn't work, as well as being a part of many individuals' spiritual practices. The superintendent and the individual who runs the ambulance company both talked about issues, sounds like coming from the budget, that giving tax rebates to East Lansing that will impact Lansing schools. I would side with the superintendent on that issue. And the other individual, and both of these make it seem as if there are revenue issues that are causing some harm along the way to individuals in this district. And for that, I have a suggestion. We've beaten around the bush. People have said it subtly. People have said it directly. But maybe it's time to start thinking about reimagining police by defunding the police. The Lansing State Journal article that came out this week talking about the officer who lied on the police report and the city publishing the victim's name and profile, and that lawsuit that they will be filing, the lawsuit that I'm sure is coming from DeAnthony Van Atten. These are things that are going to certainly impact the budget, and my understanding from a couple years ago, we're self-insured. So there's no insurance company that's going to be picking up those losses, that will be picking up those losses. Those losses were caused by this police department. I think we need to look at ways to cut funding to this police department in order to make up some of those losses. I know we won't scratch it, but I think that's important. One of the reasons I feel that way is I attended the May 5th release of the videos and listened to the police department say, oh, there's nothing on those internal videos from Meyer that will give us any different information. This is about the same as hearing Chad Connolly lie to us about Officer Stevenson and the incident with Mr. Gastido when he knew full well that Officer Stevenson had done this exact same thing only weeks earlier to Mr. Loggins. We were lied to again. The internal videos show a great deal. They show a young man coming in and shopping at Meyer and then being, for lack of a better word, bum rushed out of the building, terrified for his life, running through there without any evidence of a crime ever being committed. One of those officers carrying a weapon, his taser, in hand as he ran through the store. And then, as we all know, the officers unloading 10 shots into the Meyer parking lot without any concern for the victim himself and for all of the bystanders. One thing about that story that about breaks my heart is that my 16-year-old, 6'3" African-American son was playing basketball half a mile away, and I almost called him that night and asked him to stop at Meyer to pick a few items up on his way home. Thank God I didn't. He may have been mistaken for the alleged criminal who was not a criminal and now is a victim. He may have simply been shot randomly in the parking lot. And all of the other individuals who had to experience that because of the recklessness of our police department who have shot randomly into people is unforgivable. My point being is that we have been lied to and lied to and lied to, and we continue to believe we can continue to do the same thing and have a different outcome. I would love to have a different outcome. I have been talking to council and others for a very long time now. yes, we've made some changes to our public disturbance laws. We
30
hired
seconds
social
remaining.
workers who are no longer employed by the city. We've made these changes. We've made these changes, and nothing is having an impact. It's
15
time
seconds
to
remaining.
take away the funding from the police, put it into social workers, mental health, many other options, and move on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller Kate, you are now welcome to address the council. You'll need to unmute. You'll need to unmute on your device.
*6.
It looks like the caller has left the queue. The next caller we have is Hannah Noel. You are now welcome to address the council.
Hello. Can you hear me? I did not prepare any sort of speech for tonight, as I just did get out of work, but I did want to say a few things in regards to the proposal for decriminalizing psychedelics, and just share a bit of my own story. So last year in February of 2021 was my first experience with psychedelics, and it was highly transformative at a time in my life when I was unsure of myself. I was unsure of where to go. And I felt like a lot of things were crumbling around me, including the systems that have been set in place for us to, I guess, quote unquote, heal, including traditional therapy. And also after many years of being on and off traditional SRIs, which led me to have a really dysfunctional relationship with myself. In my exploration with fungi and other natural psychedelic medicines, I can say with complete self-assurance that my relationship with myself and the world around me has greatly improved. And I have spoken to and seen firsthand in those that I love that this same transformation has come about. And it was mentioned in a previous caller that when we look to indigenous cultures and cultures outside of our very narrow Western view, they have been using these medicines for thousands, not just hundreds, but thousands of years. And, you know, we think here in our Western society that we have all the answers, but we don't. And I think that this is a large disconnect that we have to address within our community and within ourselves, and really ask ourselves, why are we afraid of knowing? And you know, what are we afraid of finding out? And I think it really comes to a deeper question within ourselves. And I understand where people say, well, I want to keep my family safe, but the best thing that we can do to keep ourselves safe is to connect deeper with nature. So it's not just a connection with ourselves, it's using and integrating the things that literally come from the soil of the earth to heal ourselves. I mean, we have seen, again, for thousands of years, cultures that use natural medicines that by far beat whatever we can create in a lab. And not to mention the incredible impact this would have on scientific research. So when we don't know about something, we shouldn't just brush it off. We should ask questions. We should want to naturally research something. And I think that by passing by passing this referendum to decriminalize psychedelics, that will give us the opportunity to research what we don't know and to find answers and to boost morale. You may not personally have any interest, as just the last caller didn't, in doing psychedelics, but that doesn't mean that you should choose for everyone. And again, speaking to somebody who has been, who was on and off SRIs for many, many years, I can say that that was not the way for me. And I always wondered, why does this not work? And what else is there? And tapping into plants has helped me tap into myself, and both spiritually and emotionally and mentally, as well as physically. So I really urge every person on this
30 seconds remaining.
ask yourself, what is it about the unknown that scares you, and why should we not instead go forward with fervor and excitement into the unknown? Yeah, so I stand with passing this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller Bree, you are now welcome to address the council.
Hi, can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I really wasn't anticipating talking, but I'm really excited that this is coming in front of the council. Graduated from Lansing Community College and got my business associate marketing degree as well as my general associate's degree. Being someone who personally has certainly dealt with a number of different things, from depression, anxiety, PTSD. I have actually been able to utilize psychedelics, entheogens to help me with my process, to help relieve some of the symptoms and different things that I've had from the anxiety and PTSD. One of them being able to get through college for 4 years was incredibly eye-opening to me, kind of on my journey of being able to manage my stress and everything else that I had going on in my life. And kind of when I consider this and when I look at it, I really am glad that the council is taking into consideration, you know, we look at places like Portugal that had huge like drug and crime problems. And so they took an alternative approach because they wanted different results. So they decided to make a change, and they really provided therapy, a counselor, and really a rehabilitation for those people. And what they ended up having was drug use went down, crime went down, you know, and that's really just one example where a society was having an issue, and instead of just doing the same old thing, they really stepped outside of the box, got creative, and they had different results. You know, I think it was already mentioned before, but certainly psychedelics, utilizing them for medicinal and healing purposes. You know, they might not be for everyone the same way that a lot of prescription medications aren't for everyone, but it's, you know, I think we've gotten to a point where we all know what's going to be best, along with doctors, to make those good decisions for ourselves. You know, and really what we need is more sensible policies, so that we don't have incidences like whatever, you know, what happened, whatever might be happening, where, you know, people are getting shot and killed over things that they shouldn't be. So You know, again, I really just hope that they'll consider the facts and the numbers of the council, consider what everyone has said today, really step outside of yourself to ask yourself, you know, what you think that this can provide, and you know, maybe where you have a hesitation, is there maybe some more research and information that could be found out to help answer some of your questions. So thank you very much for the consideration.
Thank you.
Those are all of the callers we have on the line.
All right, thank you. Next up, communication from council. Councilperson Brookover.
No, thank you.
Councilperson Babcock.
Yes, Dr. Schuldener. Thank you.
I never got my doctorate, just Mr. is fine. Or Ben.
You're an EDD. That's good enough for me. I'm a JD, but I don't call myself a doctor. I'm a proud graduate of Lansing Eastern High School. I'm an '84 Quaker, and I want... Okay, we're everywhere, the Quakers. And I want to thank you so much for your comments. I have other comments about this proposal that I'll save for later tonight, but you put this squarely in the frame of equity. And we talk a lot about equity in East Lansing because it means a lot to us. It's extremely important to us. I believe I'm a bit older than you, or have certainly been in Lansing longer. And there continues to exist, but I remember vastly different scales of inequity across the district. I started out at Everett Elementary, and then my parents moved to Post Oak. Mom still lives there. I went to Cedar Street Elementary because when I was in first grade, they began to desegregate the schools. So I went to 3 elementary schools while living in the same house. Cedar Street, Grand River, then Pattengill, then Eastern. And for the real old timers out there, we call that Cluster 3 because the city was broken into systems. I was thinking about this weekend. I believe my sisters and I are the first members of our family in generations to not attend Catholic school, because during the time of desegregation, the Catholic school was not only attended by many children of many devout families, it was also used as a bypass for people who could afford to pay the tuition to get away from desegregation. My parents made a firm commitment to stay in the desegregated process. And I think that's why, even though we did a lot in East Lansing, I think that's why my parents were so committed to keeping us in Lansing during those times. I can honestly say that all that I am comes back to those experiences in desegregation. So I want to thank you for framing that for us in a way that was not the way I'd originally planned to ask questions about this. I hope my fellow council members give that a lot of thought as we go forward. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilperson Watson.
No, thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
Yes, I want to take a second to acknowledge one of our outgoing city employees. We are, unfortunately for us and fortunately for them, losing our finance director, Jill Feldposh, who is jumping ship and moving over to MSU FCU, where she will have a much calmer ride, which we cannot begrudge you. So and I'm glad that you're staying local so that we can call you and cry when we need to. But, I like to embarrass people on their last meeting. So we're going to pass your beautiful budget tonight, and hopefully next year's binder will be just as glorious. I know you've trained your staff well, so I'm confident that we're in good hands, and I hope that you have every good thing in your new position. I also wanted to just acknowledge Superintendent Schuldener. I'm actually going to be at Sexton next Tuesday and Thursday participating in a career fair, hopefully inspiring your seniors to become extremely low-paid politicians. So I'll be there. I don't know if you'll be at Sexton, but if I see you in the hallway, I'll high five. And then I had planned to talk about the extremely pleasant weekend that I had meandering the East Lansing Art Fair and spending far too much money. But in the middle of the afternoon, those squishy feelings were interrupted by news of the latest mass shooting in Texas. and it pushed everything else out of my head. So I find in moments of extreme tragedy that the way that I can get through is by looking to what actions I can take. I think our nation's relationship with gun culture is so toxic that addressing it in any meaningful way is a near impossible feat, and we seem to be seeing these instances of mass violence at much, unfortunately, increasing intervals. So I wanted to shout out two organizations that I've done some work with, and apparently will be renewing my acquaintance with, which is what I happen to do after these instances. Everytown USA and Moms Demand Action are two solid groups that are doing a lot of advocacy at the state and federal level for they refer to it as common sense gun control, and I frankly don't think it goes far enough, but any step towards limiting access to firearms. I think the tragedy of these instances, and I've lost friends to suicide as well, is that a moment of madness, either a psychotic break like we saw in Texas today, or a moment of deep depression can turn into a life-altering and sudden decision when you have a firearm within your reach. So if you, like me, are feeling very devastated and hopeless, hopefully you can find someone working in your area to put some meaningful actions behind those feelings.
Thank you. Yeah, just to build off those comments, obviously, we feel for the people of Uvalde, Texas, 13 children, 1 teacher, 12 injured. And those numbers are becoming all too commonplace and, like I said, begin to feel like just numbers. And we will not allow that to be any part of our culture here in East Lansing where lives lost are just numbers on a piece of paper or a news report. And I want to echo the sentiments of Mayor Pro Tem, and as well as our efforts around culture and the values that we represent here in East Lansing, and we'll work towards those. We will not back away from our values or allow anything in these public spaces to deter us from our action on our values. So I send out, just humbly, I was just laying on the bed. I almost felt like I didn't want to come here today because it seems like this is the last few meetings have been, it's just a drumbeat now. So very difficult. I want to send out a second set of condolences, well wishes, and hope to the community of Gaylord, Michigan, following all the damage to that area, tornado damage to the level where FEMA's engaged and other things are happening now. Many people out of their homes, just everything that goes along with that, clean drinking water, power, loss of jobs, and loss of everything, every possession on earth for a lot of people. So really want to send that out to that community and from East Lansing as a community. I want to send well wishes to East Lansing High School and the graduating seniors of East Lansing High School. I wish them well on all their journeys, and hopefully many of them will be here in our region and be a part of our goals and dreams for them. And in those who are going far and wide, we wish you well and carry East Lansing wherever you go, and be a representative of everything that's great about us. And we just look forward to these bright futures and future leaders going all over the world and doing what people from East Lansing do. A special thank you to all who attended East Lansing Art Fair, Festa Fair. It was well appreciated, well attended. It was getting to see people out in that setting was very moving after not being able to see people collect in those ways. And people were, all I heard was people, they were just blown away by the scale and the scope of some of the activities and just seeing us pull that event off. And I know members of staff from the downtown team to Works to the Commission on Arts to everyone, to Jesse and every other smarty arty person. I just appreciate your work and just everything that you put into that. And just the entirety of the city of East Lansing it takes to pull off something like that. It doesn't go unnoticed, and it was just incredible feedback from everyone who was able to attend, and we thank you for your help on that. I want to spend, as we complete the budget this evening, I want to spend out special thanks to the staff for all the hard work that goes into the budget. It's our one of our most kind of sacred responsibilities, and I appreciate all the work and hours that go into that as you also have to go do your regular job and continue to bring us the right answers, and some of them impromptu answers, and the quick feedback we've got on all of our questions. So thank you for that. And then a special shout out obviously to Jill Felposh. We'll miss you. We appreciate your diligence on the numbers and all those things. I often disagree, but now like I know what I'm talking about, I just disagree because I want the numbers to be different. But I thank you for all your work and just always trying to put us in good financial footing. I know the hours and the time that goes into that, and the sacrifices to family and other things probably during the budget season have to be ridiculous. So I appreciate you. We appreciate you, and you'll forever be part of this family here, and you're always welcome back here, and hopefully maybe they'll stick you across the street or something and you can just walk over here when they get that place done. But we'll miss you, and just thank you for everything. All right. I think George is out with, are you taking George's part?
He is on the phone.
Hey, George. City Manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one quick item, and that is to recognize Jill Felposh. Jill is leaving us for another opportunity in the private sector, as he mentioned. Greatly appreciate her service. I think everyone who's worked with her knows she has such great technical expertise as a CPA, extremely diligent in her work. She's worked for the city for 16 years. I've had the pleasure of working with her. She is great at her job. She brings such dedication and work ethic to it, and a high degree of professional ethic as well. The thing also people may not know about Jill from the outside is Jill is also really a business partner, a strategic partner in the organization. She works well with all of our department directors, key staff people to help solve organizational problems. She's someone that people consult with on a regular basis that include in sort of major decisions, because she really is just a great decision maker, a great leader in her area. So a big thanks and appreciation to Jill for all of her work for the past 16 years. She's done a great job for the city. Of note, she is leaving the department in very capable hands. She has a good cadre of managers under her that have worked with her, high-skilled folks, and the department is in sort of very good shape with her departure. So thanks again to Jill for her great service to the city. You will be missed, and we appreciate all of your service. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. City Attorney's report. Thank you. Next up, item 3.1, special presentation, consideration of a resolution honoring the life and legacy of the Honorable Maurice E. Schoenberger.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
And good evening to you, Mayor Pro Tem Gregg, and members of council. This evening on your agenda for consideration is a resolution put forth honoring the life and legacy of Maurice E. Schoenberger, who was the first judge for 54B District Court. So while I don't have the same history as our next two speakers, I did have the opportunity of meeting Judge Schoenberger while doing research on the history of this court. So back in 2017, I reached out to our local historian, who's also known as Judge Richard Ball, and he referred me to the former municipal judge, Jonathan Mayer, who is seated to my left. Judge Mayer provided his recollection of how this court came into existence, and then suggested I talk with Maurice Schoenberger to continue where he left off. So Judge Schoenberger took on the assignment of creating the history or providing the history of this court, and in turn provided his own treatise. And it was during this time that I learned that Judge Schoenberger was really someone who liked to personally engage. He actually came to the courthouse to take a tour and regaled us with stories and ended up just basically charming the heck out of all of us. In 2018, he returned to speak at the 50th anniversary of the legislation that created the district court system, and we celebrated that with an ice cream social. And during the planning of that social, I asked if he would rather wait until we celebrated the 50th anniversary of this court's existence. But he thought it would be better to celebrate now because who the heck would know what happened or what would happen? And it turns out he was right because the 50th anniversary of this court was January 1 of 2021, right in the midst of the pandemic, so we were unable to celebrate. So tonight, we are fortunate to have 3 judges in the audience who I feel represent the past, present, and future of this court. We have Judge Molly Hennessy Greenwald, former municipal judge for the city of East Lansing, Jonathan Mayer, and Chief Judge Richard Ball, the longest serving judge for 54B District Court. So Judge Mayer and Judge Ball will give their remarks. Afterwards, Judge Ball will read the resolution. Once he's done, we ask City Council to consider approval of the resolution honoring the life and legacy of the Honorable Maurice E. Schoenberger. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the council. I appreciate that. My name is Jonathan Mayer. I sound like I should be 105 years old, but I'm not that old. I'm 85, however. And I'd like to take this opportunity to deliver a few remarks on behalf of the resolution honoring Judge Schoenberger, who is not only a fine judge, but also a good friend of mine and over the years. And it's my privilege to make some remarks on his behalf and on behalf of the resolution. I think before I embark specifically in discussing Judge Schoenberger, I'd like to give a few comments about the way things were back in 1968 when the Michigan State Legislature created the district court system, in which in 1970 the city of East Lansing decided to participate. At that time, in 1968, there was a checkerboard, crazy quilt pattern of justice in the lower courts of Michigan. There were all kinds of judges and justices of the peace, some with law degrees and some without. Many of them were without law degrees. I think of, in my time in the prosecutor's office in the early 1965 and 1966, we had a, we had a state trooper who was a judge in Meridian Township. We had a school teacher who was a judge in Stockbridge. We had 2 insurance agents who were judges respectively in Leslie and Delhi Township. We had in Mason a judge, Honorable Roy Adams, who was so old that nobody could remember what he had done in his previous life, perhaps including himself. He had handlebar mustaches, and he had written a couple of interesting books about the Civil War, in which I believe he might have even participated. I don't think so. That's off the table in terms of my remarks. And then there was the infamous Judge Hutter's Court, which was adjoining Max Bar on Michigan Avenue, in which George Hutter, a kindly and astute justice of the peace, would occasionally draw panels of jurors from the Max Bar in the next building, next to the building where he was. And as a prosecutor, I can say it was very difficult to secure convictions of drunk driving when I had a jury of that makeup. Anyway, that was just an overview of the picture that prevailed in 1968 when the Michigan legislature decided to adopt a statewide district court system. Arguments were normally decided not so much by the integrity of the law that they presented, but by the vociferousness with which they were presented, by the pounding on the table, and by the loudness of the arguments, as opposed to the integrity and faithfulness to the legal principles that were addressed. So into the breach stepped the Michigan legislature. It was a very colorful system, but they decided it was a little more colorful than it needed to be, and they decided to enact the district court system, which required that judges be graduates of law school and full-time. At that time, in 1968, Bill Harmon and I were part-time judges in the East Lansing municipal court. Judge Harmon was a municipal judge, I was the associate municipal judge. Between the two of us, we handled the docket that went through the East Lansing municipal court system. And I think we did it fairly well, but in 1970, the East Lansing City Council decided to opt into the district court system. And at that time, Judge Harmon and I heard from Morris Schoenberger, who was then in private practice, of his interest in becoming the first district judge in East Lansing. Well, Bill Harmon and I got quite excited about this because we knew Morris Schoenberger. We knew him to be a very fair and impartial person, and one who would suitably fill the shoes of the prospective position of a full-time district judge in East Lansing. So we, to the extent we had levers to pull, we pulled them, but other people pulled levers and persuaded Judge Milliken to appoint Judge Schoenberger to be the first district court in the 54B judicial district, which was the East Lansing District Court. So it was the finest decision that could have been made. Judge Schoenberger turned out to be, as predicted, a very fine district judge. He was possessed of that abnormal quality that we call judicial temperament, which nobody can describe, but which basically consists of the ability to hear impartially and with sensitivity and respect the positions of all parties in a matter of litigation, and to decide the matter pursuant to impeachable principles of justice. Morris Schoenberger did that, and he did it admirably well. He did it with humility. I remember him one time telling me that, you know, you go to court in the morning and people say, Your Honor this and Your Honor that. By the time you get home, your ego is so inflated that you don't hear your wife saying it's time to take out the trash. And he would take out the trash, and it would be the great leveler that would bring him down to ordinary mortality. He served as district judge in East Lansing for 4 years, from 1970 to 1974, at which time he returned to private practice and became a highly sought-after mediator in most cases involving domestic relations, in which the clients are the most emotionally charged and passionately involved parties you could imagine any kind of litigation. And did an admirable job of the same thing he did in his district court position, of listening carefully to both sides, sensitively and with compassion and empathy, in making decisions that were resolving tremendous domestic issues and problems. And for that, he received many accolades throughout the years. Judge Schoenberger was truly a star on the judicial temperament. He was one who was, East Lansing was most fortunate to have as its first district judge. He did everything with humility, with grace, with dedication to the finer principles of justice. He was a remarkable man and a remarkable judge. When I was a young boy, my father had this idea of having us children memorize Rudyard Kipling's poem, If, and giving us 25 cents for each stanza that we would memorize. And there's one line in that poem that I can remember that admirably fits the character of Morris Schoenberger, and that is, if you can walk with kings, nor lose the common touch. And that was certainly epitomized Morris Schoenberger's tenure as judge, as mediator, and as an individual. He was that kind of man, he was that kind of judge, and may he rest in peace, and may the trajectory of his judicial temperament still be available and obvious in the East Lansing District Court. Thank you very much for the ability to make those comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a little difficult for me because I feel a deep personal loss at Maury's passing. He's a few years older than me, but we were great friends, and I know I can say the same for George Brookover, one of your colleagues here. What John Mayer has said is absolutely true. Maury, as we all knew him, was a judge for only 3 years. Hope I have that calculated correctly. It's January 1, 1970 through, I think, February of 74, so a little bit more than 3 years. And he was just over halfway through his first 6-year term when he decided to resign. I think I know why he resigned, and I think it was probably because of a matter of sincere conscience on his part. He had been struggling with one of the few homicide cases that we have had here in East Lansing over the years, an incident that occurred on campus. And the short version of all of that, and he would describe it as the Stanley Price case. Price was the suspect at the time that he was dealing with the matter, and Maury was and felt compelled to dismiss the case because of a constitutional infraction on the part of the investigating officers. And in fact, the case came back to my court in, hope I have this right, 2004, because double jeopardy didn't attach. And I know what you're all thinking, DNA evidence came forward, and that's not true. An ex-wife came forward and provided some evidence that caused the defendant to be convicted. But I think Maury was just uncomfortable in a very sincere way about what had occurred in that case, and one or two others that he has described and would mention. Maury was more than a judge for 3 years in East Lansing. He was a citizen of this community since 1966. Sadly, his wife Jan passed away in 2007, but before that they raised 3 children here, one of whom eulogized Maury at the service on Thursday in a manner I surely hope I could be eulogized by one of my children at the time of my death. It was a terrific eulogy, which said more about Maury than I could say here. And he was a quiet citizen. I know that I don't want to be offensive when I say the mayor struggled with his last name. Now, what that told me is you didn't really know him. And I think the reason you didn't know him is because what he did here in the city and throughout the city. His office was here. He attended church here in East Lansing. Again, his kids were here, went to high school in the East Lansing High School. He was involved in literacy programs. He represented a lot of folks for free who needed to be or have representation in the area of family law, who couldn't afford a lawyer's services. But see, none of us really know that because we don't hear that. I've learned some things about Maury in the last few weeks, all good things that I never had the opportunity to know. But he was a great lawyer and a great person. Grew up in Ludington, Michigan, of all places, and left there to go to U of M, and forever had difficulties after that, but nevertheless came here after Michigan Law School, after the University of Michigan, and again stayed here since from 1966. One of his daughters, I believe, still lives here. At any rate, I'd like to present this resolution and read it into the record, and I hope that you'll consider it and adopt it, and know that you're honoring one of the great citizens of this community. And the resolution reads as follows. Whereas, excuse me, the Honorable Maurice E. Schoenberger served as the first judge of the 54B District Court from January 1971 through February 24, 1974, And whereas the Honorable Maurice E. Schoenberger was a graduate of the University of Michigan and a 1966 graduate of the U of M Law School. And whereas the Honorable Maurice E. Schoenberger was a resident of the city of East Lansing from 1966 until the date of his death on May 12, 2022, and resided in the city with his wife Jan and their 3 children. Whereas the Honorable Maurice E. Schoenberger was appointed as a district judge in Michigan, or by Michigan Governor William G. Milliken, and the East Lansing City Council. I think for that appointment, I think both the council and the governor had some appointment authority. Oh no, I've lost my place. At any rate, he replaced and succeeded former Associate Municipal Judges William K. Harmon and Jonathan Mayer, who both returned to private practice. Whereas the Honorable Maurice E. Schoenberger oversaw the separation of the 54B District Court into the 54A District Court. Oversaw the separation of the 54A District Court in Lansing to the 54B District Court in East Lansing in 1971. There's a story there too, because for a while we were, in fact, I think for a while we were part of the 54 District Court, which was East Lansing and Lansing. There's a story there that I won't relate to you. Whereas he distinguished himself as a member of the State Bar of Michigan and the Ingham County Bar Association throughout his professional career, and among other things served as the chair of the Ingham County Bar Judicial Qualifications Committee for many years. And whereas the Honorable Maurice E. Schoenberger was known in the legal community as an outstanding lawyer and advocate in his role as a family lawyer, and also in his role as a court-appointed or privately engaged mediator in family law or domestic relations cases. Whereas in 2002, he was presented with the coveted Theodore W. Swift Civility Award by the Ingham County Bar Association, and in 2009 was presented with the Family Lawyer of the Year Award by the Ingham County Bar Association. And whereas the Honorable Maurice E. Schoenberger celebrated the 50th anniversary of the legislative creation of Michigan's district courts in 2018, shared his personal recollection of his time on the bench with notable cases, such as I had indicated, the Stanley Price case, the Cambodian bombing protests, the American flag case, which involved a van decorated with the American flag during the peak of the Vietnam War, and raising all kinds of issues of whether that person who drove the van was disorderly, and whether, if so, was his free speech being impacted unconstitutionally. I can't tell you how that case turned out, but I was a student here at the time, and I remember a portion of that case. And what Maury calls the dog case, which I won't describe. It's resolved that the East Lansing City Council extends its condolences to the family of the Honorable Maurice E. Schoenberger and hereby honors his life and legacy by adoption of this resolution. And I ask you to favorably consider that adoption. And I wish you all had known him. Thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I would simply say I had the opportunity to speak with Judge Schoenberger a month or so ago, and we were going to go for coffee. And then came one of those catastrophic 6 feet of snow Friday afternoons, and we never made it. And I'd heard many great things about him throughout his life, but during our conversation, speaking of humility, I mentioned that I have long deeply admired his sister, former State Senator Lana Pollock, who's something of a role model and inspiration to me. And he said, well, people tend to be of two minds about his sister. And then he proceeded to tell me about his sister. And I said, well, Judge, what about you? Oh, well, my sister's done a lot of good things. He was truly a great man, and I'm sorry I never got to have that coffee with him. And I thank you for the remembrance.
You're lucky if you got to meet with him in the last month of his life. I don't think it's improper to say that he suffered from Parkinson's.
Yeah.
And that was the cause of his untimely death.
Yeah, and so mobility was chancy, but really wonderful. And some of the things you're saying brings back these vague back of mind memories from having grown up here.
Right.
And thank you for that.
Thank you.
And reiterating the deepest condolences to the family, as well as just a thank you for helping to establish 54B, which, as I've discovered through my time here, is a very special place, a very unique place, and the types of services provided through that court are just amazing, and just something I have just endeared myself to and love the work that you guys do. So I just appreciate the history and his contribution to establishing this for us. So thank you
Can I
guys.
just interrupt and say, do you know where the first courtroom was?
I sure don't.
Can you envision the PACE office now on the second floor of City Hall? Right there was the first courtroom. And I had gone to, that's a long story, I'm sorry, but that's where that the first courtroom was. Kind of small, but nevertheless, that's where it was located.
Mayor Bacon, if I just might have a point of privilege. So I do want to thank Associate Justice Mayer for allowing me to plead guilty in August of 1968. 2 days before.
Was that your van?
No. 2 days before I left for the East Coast for college, to a charge of minor in possession. And I thank you for allowing me to plead in front of you, fining me accordingly, and then not telling my father, who was on the East Lansing City Council.
Well, there isn't some changes now in the expungement statute.
Well, that won't be the first thing I'll have to expunge.
All right. If there's no more comments, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? I'd hope not. Motion carries.
Thank
Resolution.
you.
Thank you, guys. Next up, the consent agenda.
I move the consent agenda with the exception of 4.4. It was my understanding that the fire chief wanted to pull that and defer it for 2 weeks, but I don't know if that made an amended agenda. So.
Was that correct?
The item was removed because the contract that was being worked on was not ready in time for council's consideration. Correct. It had been removed well before 18 hours in advance.
Okay. So I move the consent agenda.
I believe we need to read it into the record.
You're up.
We have the following items on the consent agenda for council's consideration. Item 4.1, approve a resolution acknowledging June 2022 as Men's Health Month. 4.2, approve a resolution acknowledging 50 years of the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Kappa Delta Lambda Chapter. Item 4.3, approve a resolution authorizing Paolo Perna to purchase 5 years of service credit from Municipal Employees Retirement System, MERS. Item 4.4, approve a contract with 100 Acre Woods in the amount of $97,480 for soccer field maintenance at the East Lansing Soccer Complex in East Lansing Hannah Community Center for a period of 1 year, beginning April 1st, 2022, and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 4.5, approve an agreement with MFCI LLC to provide financial advisory services for the city as needed. Item 4.6, approve an agreement with Dickinson Wright PLLC to serve as bond counsel for the city as needed. Item 4.7, approve a change order to the material testing services contract with Professional Services Industries Incorporated in the amount of $75,000 and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 4.8, approve a change order to the contract with C&D Hughes Incorporated for the Burcham Valve Replacement Project in the amount of $64,154.22 and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 4.9, approve a use of public right-of-way request for Moonlight Extravaganza, a night to eat, shop, and explore your new downtown, planned for August 29th, 2022. Item 4.10, approve policy resolution 2022-9, a resolution establishing a capital asset management policy. Item 4.11, approve policy resolution 2022-10, a resolution establishing a revised policy for federal grant awards. Item 4.12, approve policy resolution 2022-11, a resolution establishing a revised fund balance reserve policy. Item 4.13, approve policy resolution 2022-12, a resolution establishing a purchasing card, P-card policy. Item 4.14, approve policy resolution 2022-13, a resolution establishing a revised purchasing policy and guidelines. Item 4.15, approve the assurances form as required as supporting documentation for the city's Michigan Arts and Cultural Council Capital Improvement Program grant application and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 4.16, approve the assurances form as required as supporting documentation for the city's Michigan Arts and Cultural Council Program Support Grant application and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 4.17, approve a request from Patio Cash LLC for city liquor license and entertainment license at 521 East Grand River, Peanut Barrel. Item 4.18, approve an amended settlement and release agreement with Adams Outdoor Advertising. Those are all of the items on the consent agenda for council's consideration.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Consent agenda carries. Based on the amount of material on this agenda, we're going to take a 10-minute break right here as we got a marathon here. So 10 minutes, return.
So 8:50?
Next up, public hearing, item 5.1, consideration of a resolution to establish an industrial development district per Public Act 198 as amended at 3400 West Road.
Good evening, Council. Adam Cummins, Community and Economic Development Administrator. Before you this evening, there are actually 3 public hearings that are before you tonight for consideration, and they're all interconnected with the same project. So this presentation that I'm about to give is intended to cover all 3. And I just want to also state and note that we did post updated versions of the resolutions today. However, there's still one update that would be needed should these resolutions be approved, and that's on the resolution to approve an IFT, Industrial Facilities Tax Exemption, aka Real Property Tax Exemption, on the 4th paragraph, the 4th whereas. I believe it's a second line. There's a placeholder for date when the city received the official application. And it just says parentheses, date, parentheses. That should actually state April 28th, 2022. We also provided some more precise numbers that are reflected in this presentation based on our financial analysis, and those differ slightly than what's in the memo. So just want to state that before we got started. Next slide, please. All right, so Autosteo, they're a global leader in drivetrain testing operations. They're formed in 1986, headquartered in Germany. There's over 750 employees globally. They've engaged with regional partners such as LEAP, MEDC, obviously City of East Lansing, MSU, and they're seeking financial incentives to locate a major research and development operation in East Lansing at 3400 West Road. So to summarize the project a little bit, it'd be a long-term lease at approximately 35,000 square feet. This would be an increase from 28,000 square feet based on the improvements. Investing approximately $700,000 in real property, building improvements, investing approximately $26 million in personal property, machinery and equipment, if you will, in the first 5 years, adding 46 new jobs within the first 3 years of operations, which the average salary would be around $69,000. And those would include engineers, technicians, and mechanics and electricians. So, again, there are 3 requests before council tonight to consider. And this presentation is intended to cover all 3. The first request would be to establish an industrial development district per Public Act 198. And if that industrial development district is established, approve a 10-year industrial facilities tax exemption per Public Act 198, and also approve a 10-year new personal property tax exemption per Public Act 328. And just some other financial support, the Michigan New Jobs Training Program, approximately $284,000, Going Pro Talent Fund, $138,000, Capital Area Michigan Works, almost $15,000, and then an MEDC Business Development Program grant at an amount that to be determined or unknown to city staff at this time. So, the financial analysis summary. What you're seeing here is a comparison between City of East Lansing and LEAP staff, each analysis. As you can see, they do differ, but the big picture here is they are close, and I want to emphasize these are estimates based on, the assumptions included in your memo. The personal property and real property tax exemptions plus project income, those were all estimated and evaluated by staff. And again, although they differ from LEAPs, they are mostly closely aligned. As you can see, the red indicates, so the first table under City of East Lansing analysis, for example, that first table represents an impact to all taxing jurisdictions over the full 10 years of exemptions. And then the table below is City of East Lansing specific, those impacts to the City of East Lansing over the full 10 years of the exemptions. And same thing on the LEAP side of their analysis.
Mr. Cummins, can I ask a question before you move back?
Yes.
Because we had public comment earlier from the Lansing superintendent, I think that's all on our minds, obviously.
Correct.
So the real property, and I'm going to go with the City of East Lansing analysis because I trust my staff more than other people. The real property is listed at $13,103 under all taxing jurisdictions, and then for Lansing, for East Lansing, it's about $3,000, leaving about $10,000 that's split up between our other taxing jurisdictions. So that would be county. I guess who besides the Lansing School
LCC,
District? Okay.
Lansing School District, yeah.
And do we have an idea? I mean, I know that wasn't part of your analysis, but do you have kind of a guesstimate, as it were, about how much of this would be for the school district?
I would say it'd be close to ours, maybe a little more on the real property.
Okay.
Maybe a little less on the personal property, but our analysis was specific to City of East Lansing.
Fair.
And then the jurisdictions as a whole.
Okay. So
and I have not conducted Lansing specific analysis.
Sure, but that gives us kind of an idea of what we're talking about in terms of the loss to that body. Thank you. Go ahead.
You're welcome.
Continue, please.
So next slide, please. Just some project pros and cons. The location's already equipped for the proposed use. Minimal impact to the environment and city services. 46 high-quality, good-paying jobs in alignment with the economic development strategic plan, such as the regional partnerships, the talent pipeline out of MSU, LCC, and support for Northern Tier development. Some cons, potential losses from related opportunity costs, and then, of course, a need for the incentive. Next slide, please. Get a sip of water real quick. Okay, so just to summarize, each of the requests before you tonight, the resolutions are also associated with their own public hearing, which are on the agenda. And again, that's to establish an industrial development district, approve a 10-year industrial facilities tax exemption, and approve a 10-year new personal property tax exemption. So with that, can take any questions.
I'm looking at page 243, excuse me, of our materials, which I think is the same summary of financial analysis that you just had up as a pictorial.
Okay.
And after the itemization of the taxing jurisdictions, and maybe our financial guru can help us with this, you have this portion of the request for the real property exemption. This portion of the request would essentially abate 50% of new taxable value on the real property. Therefore, the current taxes would remain in place, and an increase of taxable value of approximately $350,000 would bring in additional taxes relative to 50% of all millages to each taxing jurisdiction. So to make sure I can understand it in the context of the public comment earlier. This is not an abatement of all property taxes for this 10 years. This is an abatement of 50% of new taxable value on the real property, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so from your chart, and I apologize if I haven't figured this out, but so what's the new taxable value increment going to be by our estimates?
Specific to City of East Lansing or?
No,
overall?
to the property.
To the property. Let's see. I don't believe I have that right in front of me.
I think, Mr. Brookover, if you go up onto the 2 pages previous, our numbers are different. It talks about the summary of project attributes, investing approximately $700,000 into real property building improvements. So that would be the increment of new property to be taxed. And then that $350,000 that's referred to in the passage that you just read out would be the 50% increment that is actually going to be abated. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cummins.
The $700,000 will be invested into improving the property. That will not be the new property taxable value, though, if that's what you're asking.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes. So I'm searching for the number, and I apologize, I'm not finding it.
Ms. Felposh, can you help us with that by any chance?
So typically, the taxable value is 50% of the true cash value. So in this instance, we took 50% of the invested $700,000 and came up with $350,000 as the estimated additional taxable value.
To all jurisdictions?
To the value of the property, which would then be assessed upon all jurisdictions.
Okay, so what's the net loss to the City of Lansing / Lansing School District relative to the property taxes?
We don't have that specific data point, but it's in the ballpark of about the same as the City of East Lansing. I believe it's slightly more on the real property and slightly less on the personal property.
Well, that's what I was thinking. So the real property is the biggest hit, the personal property is the smaller hit?
No, it's the other way around.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
Yeah, because they're proposing to make the significant investment in terms of the personal property. It should be noted that their expectation is that the personal property is already going to be exempted by the state law.
Right.
However, the way that we analyzed it was really to take into account that they're requesting this exemption from the city, and therefore the analysis reflects the full abatement from the city through the PA 328.
Yeah, but in other words, they have the right to go to the state and get the personal property abatement directly from the state.
We think that's likely, but we're not tax attorneys and not knowledgeable about the specific vagaries of the tax law. So I think there's certainly on its face a great case to be made. I think that their attorney had opined that it's likely to be exempted through the EMPP, the eligible manufacturing personal property rules that are on the books. However, that's not a certainty, and so the way that we underwrote it.
I'm not asking to speculate, Tom. I just wanted to certify that they have the right under the existing state statute to go and seek this exact same abatement with the state that they're seeking with us.
That's correct. It may in fact happen naturally.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a two-meeting process theoretically under the ordinances and the statutes? There's a public hearing tonight, and then we vote at the next meeting?
We would be voting on this after the public hearing.
Tonight?
Tonight.
Okay.
Comments?
Maybe I should save them Until we've heard all the presentations.
So open public hearing on each item, okay. I'll open the public hearing on item 5.1, consideration of establishing of a resolution to establish an industrial development district per Public Act 198 as amended at 3400 West Road. Public hearing's open.
Good evening, Council. Dylan Rush, the Director of Business Attraction at LEAP. Good to see everybody again. Thank you, Adam, for the presentation and for your consideration tonight of the various resolutions in front of you. I just wanted to make a quick comment about the school districts because that's critically important as we began to discuss tonight already. Economic development and schools are joined at the hip, and they are inevitably tied as the schools go, so to business, schools. But there's a very important clarification I just want to make really clear about the incentives and how they relate to the impact on that school district, the Lansing School District. Councilmember Brookover mentioned it. There's no effect on the existing taxes coming in from that property. And the only thing that this incentive actually does is increase tax revenue to the school district, to LCC, to CATA, to all the county, jail, libraries. It only increases it because there is no new revenue without the incentives, because without the incentives, there's no new project. There's no new jobs. There's no new small business community spending, community engagement, housing, all the great things that actually do increase the tax revenue on top of the 50% that's not abated the first 10 years, and then beyond the full tax revenue. So again, they truly are joined at the hip, and it's imperative that I think that we all understand that this is really a phenomenal way to grow our school districts, to grow the other taxing jurisdictions, because it does improve the tax base fully. There's no reduction at all because it's bringing the new jobs, it's bringing the investment. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I'll be around for Tom and Adam for questions after the public hearing closes and for your comments too.
Well, while you're throwing that around,
Yeah.
Has anybody at LEAP talked to the Lansing School Board or the superintendent about this?
No, we have not.
Wow. Right, and so there's a personal property tax abatement here, correct?
Yes.
All right, so it's effectively 100% personal property tax abatement if the personal property is purchased, correct?
Correct, and that is
And
that.
so your point is, if they don't purchase the personal property, that wouldn't be taxed anyway.
Say that again, one more time.
Well, there's a current tax from this site going to the Lansing schools, correct?
Correct, and that will maintain. Yep, that will persist. So all the $26 million that is anticipated to be invested over the next few years, if we land this project, is all new investment that's currently not here. That investment likely, as Mr. Fehrenbach mentioned, would never go to the school district anyway. It would never go to anybody because it's eligible manufacturing personal property via the statute, I think it was 2015, around there, to help incentivize manufacturing investment.
If the state allows it.
If it meets some of the vagaries that Mr. Fehrenbach was talking about, pretty complex
Well,
stuff.
I would just like you to take back to the Mr. Tresice, who I've known for 20 years, my astonishment that you, as a regional coordinator of these things, has not even discussed this with the Lansing schools. I'm astonished.
I will take that back. That's good feedback, and we'll talk about it further.
In fact, now I'm proud at Lansing Eastern, and he's an 85 Big Red, which makes it all the more astonishing. It wouldn't occur to him. Sexton.
Yeah, Sexton. Proud graduate.
Floor is open. There's no further comment from the public. I'll close the public hearing.
Mayor Bacon, we have a few callers on
Oh,
the
callers.
line.
Okay, online, yeah.
Caller Aditi, you are welcome to address the council. If you do not wish to speak on this topic, you're welcome to say pass when you are called on. You may need to unmute your device.
Pass.
Next, we have Brad Willett. You are now welcome to address the council, but you may say pass if you do not wish to speak on this topic. You may need to unmute your device if you'd like to speak.
Oh, sorry, I'm past.
Next caller, with the name L, you are now welcome to address council. I believe this individual spoke earlier on a different topic. We do have one more caller. Decriminalize Nature Michigan. You are now welcome to address the council, but if you do not wish to speak on this public hearing, you're welcome to pass. I believe this individual also spoke earlier. Those are all the callers we have on the line.
Seeing no other in person or in the virtual queue, I'll close the public hearing. So, Tony, we're voting, this is everything tonight for each one of these as we.
Yes, and now we need a motion on the underlying resolution.
Okay.
I move the resolution with regard to the Industrial Development District per Public Act 198 as amended at 3400 West Road.
Move.
Second.
Moved in second. Discussion?
Well, I think my thoughts are summed up by Mr. Rush from LEAP, is that although this is presented as an abatement, the fact is that this results in an increase in taxes for the jurisdictions that wouldn't happen if this project didn't come to our area. And my understanding is that this project will not come without these abatements. So although we wouldn't be capturing 100% of the increase, we're capturing 50% of the increase, which is an increase. So I can talk about my personal feelings about personal property taxes, which I think that they are short-sighted. I think they disincentivize people from investing in their businesses. I don't think it's a great way to get tax money. So, I'd like to abate them for everyone, frankly, because I just feel like it's short-sighted. But I don't have a problem in this case, especially since it seems like it's out of our hands. But in the unlikely event that it comes back to us, I don't have a problem with that.
For me, broadly on this issue, and it's really just comes down to kind of the verticality of this type of business and what's going on in the region, along with the inertia, the business inertia around that, just as far as energy and all the other research and everything else that's going around here. So I'm attracted to this type of investment for our region in general. So for me, it's more of the sum of good parts here in attracting these types of this type of industry, and hopefully LEAP and other partners in the region, and along with ourselves, will continue to create some attractive nature to this as we build out the other businesses and other things that are tied into this this marketplace and energy in general and all the stuff that's going to happen around it. I think that obviously this is the future, yeah, that's kind of my opinion on that. So based upon that and the primarily low risk and the fact that the state would likely abate this personal property stuff anyway based upon their rules, yeah, I find myself in support of this in general.
Before the school superintendent spoke, I had given this a lot of thought, and I was thinking about what would happen if I were to ask any of your LEAP businesses to give me 50% off everything they provide, everything they make, everything they produce. And I'm sure they would say no. Now, they might offer me some kind of discount because, for various reasons, they probably have a margin of profit built into their pricing structure. This is where we're different. And Mr. Dempsey knows this. We don't build profit into taxes. We levy taxes to cover the cost of services. And you can tell me you don't use all the services, but we don't offer a la carte government services here. So no one does. And while we have to cover in our tax revenue a certain margin of reserve, or what I call savings account, that's required by law. I would never have the audacity to expect someone coming here to give me 50% of their future earnings. And the reason someone wants to come here, the reason a business wants to live, is because we have a fabulous library, we have great communities, we have great schools. Now, we all know, that Lansing schools are suffering, and they're the ones who are going to be hurt by this. And I think there's a certain, not among my peers here on the council, but it has been replicated around the state, one community in particular in Metro Detroit, where whenever a tax abatement came up for the urban or semi-urban school district next door, the suburban township would be like, sure, we'll do it. They didn't really care. That's not true of us. That's not true of anyone at this table. But you want to come here because, or they want to come here, they're not here. I'd even dusted off some high school German, but they're not here. They want to come here because of our quality of life, because we have great amenities, because we have a great library, we have great schools, we have a large major university, which I'll remind you is taxpayer funded, as notably is LEAP. So if you want funds to cover all of these things, we have to be able to levy them. There's no profit to cut into. We levy for the services we provide. And time and again, we hear that it's a win-win-win situation. But it's also a Hobson's choice for those of us who sit up here. Are you against jobs? No, I'm not against jobs. Are you against technology? No, unless it's an Apple product. But really, we are charged with looking out for the future of this community. Tonight, we're going to vote on a budget. Budgets mean revenues. We have to look at not just now, but also in the future. I would never go to a board of directors, say General Motors, and say, sell me that car for 50%. But time and again, businesses come here and say, give us what you have for 50% or we'll leave. We are not a supplicant community. I've lived in communities that have had to work very, very hard to get people in the door. They have always faced that Hobson's choice. One of the great things about East Lansing is that we have a little more negotiating power, and I recommend we use it, if not on our behalf, on behalf of the kids in the Lansing school system. Thank you.
Well, with the caveat that I'm a little disappointed in LEAP for not dealing with the Lansing Public Schools, I respectfully disagree with my seat mate here. I think I welcome this possibility. I think in the end, this is a net gain financially. I tend to share the thoughts of the mayor and mayor pro tem. at some basic level, in my way of thinking, no jobs, no taxes, no jobs, no housing, no jobs, no more school kids in the Lansing schools. And parenthetically, with regard to what I consider to be the regional approach to all of these issues, this is a ballet that has had to be performed with the Lansing Public Schools in the northern tier for several years. I guess if I had wanted to engage with the superintendent, I would have discussed with him the fact that the city of East Lansing has done projects within the last 20 years which have resulted in single-family housing with kids going to the Lansing Public Schools rather than the East Lansing Public Schools, taxes going to Lansing and the Lansing Public Schools. So we go through this cooperatively. I think on balance, my fiduciary duty is to the taxpayers of the city of East Lansing, and I believe that they're well served by this project if, in fact, it comes to fruition. But I also happen to think that there's an additional asset value to the city of Lansing, the Lansing Public Schools, in bringing in another technology industrial center. And I would simply point out to the prospectus materials that indicate that the attractiveness of the community has something to do with Lansing Community College, which is also a city of Lansing, Lansing Public Schools, county entity, Michigan State University. So there's a lot of things that combine for this particular location. And I hope that it actually happens. So I'm going to be voting in favor of the motion.
Further comment? All right. Seeing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1. Next up, item 5.2, public hearing, consideration of a resolution approving the real property tax exemption and related agreement pursuant to Public Act 198 as amended at 3400 West Road.
Can y'all hear me? There we go. Thank you, Mayor. As I stated previously, these are all interrelated. We just discussed this. The difference between this resolution, this request of consideration is you'd be considering a resolution approving a real property tax exemption, a PA 198, and a related agreement pursuant to Public Act 198 as amended at 3400 West Road. And this is the resolution where the fourth paragraph, the fourth whereas, second line, has a placeholder for date that should state April 28th, 2022.
All right, at this point, on item 5.2, I'll open the public hearing. Seeing none in person, online.
I will call on everyone in the online queue. If you do not wish to speak on this topic, you may say pass when you are called on. Caller Aditi, you are now welcome to address the council.
Pass.
Caller Brad Willett, you are now welcome to address the council. You may need to unmute your device. Would you like me to move on to the next caller, Mayor? Caller L, you are now welcome to address the council. I believe they spoke earlier on a separate item. Those are all the callers we have on the line.
All right, at this time, I'll close the public hearing.
I'll move the resolution with the insertion of the date of April 28th. Is that the correct date?
That is correct.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 5.2, 4-1. Next up, item 5.3, public hearing. Consideration of a resolution approving a new personal property tax exemption application and related agreement pursuant to Public Act 328 as amended at 3400 West Road.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. As I stated previously, same request, all interrelated, interconnected. This is consideration of a resolution approving a new personal property tax exemption application and related agreement pursuant to Public Act 328 as amended at 3400 West Road.
At this time, I'll open the public hearing on item 5.3. In-person comment? Seeing none.
Everyone in the online queue, if you do not wish to speak on this topic, you're welcome to say pass when you are called on. Aditi, you are now welcome to address the council.
Pass.
Brad Willett, you are now welcome to address the council. You may need to unmute on your device. All right, the last caller we have is L. You are welcome to address the council. Those are all the callers we have on the line.
This time, I'll close the public hearing on item 5.3.
I move the resolution approving a new personal property tax exemption application and related agreement pursuant to Public Act 328 as amended at 3400 West Road.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
All right. Motion carries on item 5.3, 4-1. Next up, item 5.4, consideration of a resolution to approve the tax increment finance plan for the Local Development Finance Authority for the cities of Lansing and East Lansing.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tom Fehrenbach, the Director of Planning, Building, and Development. We have gone through the presentation at our last session. Before you tonight is the actual approval of the TIF plan itself, as well as an operating agreement between the City of Lansing and East Lansing. Still in development is a interlocal agreement that would include the LDFA itself, the two cities, and the MEDC. That is very near finalized, and I would expect it to come back in June, probably at your June 7th meeting. So that is not on the table tonight. And I won't go through the whole presentation again, but I'm happy to take any questions, or if you'd prefer me to give the presentation again, I'm happy to do that too. Otherwise, I'd recommend that you open the public hearing and see if there's public comments prior to your consideration.
I like that recommendation. At this time, open the public hearing. Seeing no in-person comment, we'll go to the queue.
Yep, I'll make sure to give everyone a chance to speak. Aditi, you are now welcome to address the council. If you do not wish to speak on this item, you're welcome to say pass.
Pass.
Brad Willett, you are now welcome to address the council. Caller L, you are now welcome to address the council. Those are all the callers we have on the line.
All right. At this time, I'll close the public hearing on item 5.4. And there's no action today on this item, correct? This will be on a future agenda.
Today's the day for action.
This is the day?
Yep.
Okay. I'll look for motion.
I'll move consideration of a resolution to approve the tax increment financing plan for the Local Development Finance Authority for the cities of Lansing and East Lansing.
Look for a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
Has the city attorney reviewed the operating agreement? I don't remember us talking about the operating agreement, which is part of this resolution tonight.
Yes, I believe that's one of the documents we've already approved, yeah.
And you're satisfied that the City of East Lansing's interests are protected under the operating agreement going forward for 5 years?
Yeah, that's correct, but we also have the interlocal agreement that we will be bringing back soon that kind of further defines how the interplay between the parties.
Well, that's sort of my concern. I mean, I kind of feel like I don't have any problem with the main resolution, but passing the operating agreement without the interlocal agreement seems to me to be sort of, I guess, putting the cart before the horse. A question for staff, could we just pass the main resolution and defer on the second part of it? Can't hear you.
Here it comes.
Oh, there we go. You could certainly do that. The difference between the operating agreement and the interlocal is really the operating agreement is specifically how the cities are going to operate the LDFA, including the board appointments, the finances, and the dissolution of the LDFA ultimately. And the Smart Zone agreement is really the agreement between kind of the larger parties, the Smart Zone itself, the MEDC, and the two cities. And that's really in terms of how it will operate under the State Act PA 57 and address all of the reporting requirements and the related regulations. So we could certainly bring those two back together. I don't see any problem with that. But specifically to the operating agreement, the main thrust is really related to the board appointments, and it's also where the Rising Tide 10% fund to benefit the district as a whole comes into play, which I've mentioned previously.
You kind of just mixed me up there, Tom. I'm sorry. So the operating agreement is vis-a-vis the state, et cetera?
Nope, the operating agreement is between the cities of Lansing and East Lansing, the two portions of the two districts that have potential TIF capture. And it's really sets in stone how the board will be established. It includes members from Lansing, East Lansing, Ingham County, the 2 school districts, and LCC. And then also really just establishes the protocols for how we'll work together between the 2 cities to manage the LDFA, and again establishes the 10% rising tide fund that really is meant to benefit the smart zone as a whole.
And I assume one of the school districts is the Lansing School District?
That's correct. Lansing School District will actually already has 2 members at the table, as does the East Lansing Public School District. They're per the act, they really can only vote on matters related to the expenditure of their millages. But nevertheless, they are at the table, and there's, I think, been some really interesting conversations about how to engage the 2 school districts in the innovation economy here in the greater Lansing area and in East Lansing specifically. So a lot of energy there, and I think some really interesting ideas percolating.
And can you summarize for us? I mean, is there any change in the appointments or number of appointments the city of East Lansing gets in this?
Yes, the city of East Lansing would have 4 appointments, one of which would be for the MSU Innovation Center. And the city of Lansing would have 3 appointments, one of which would be for MSU proper. And then the other appointments remain the same. There was a recent update to add 2 members from each school district. LCC and Ingham County have been represented previously.
Okay, my question is, are we continuing the same appointments that we've had before, or has it changed?
It's continuing the appointments that exist prior to the TIF plan being extended, but those appointments have changed over the course of the recent past.
Okay.
I think in preparation for the TIF plan extension, as we've had multiple conversations with MEDC and sort of clarified our understanding of how the board should be made up.
All right, thank you.
Discussion?
I think we have a motion, a seconded motion on the table to vote on.
All right, we're good to go. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Can I just clarify that your motion was to approve the TIF plan and the operating agreement?
Can some restate the motion, the original?
Hang on, I scrolled past, but I can. I just read the heading, but if it didn't include the operating agreement, I can do that. I guess, yeah, my motion as stated did not include the operating agreement, so it was just the tax increment financing plan. So I think if we want to vote on the operating agreement, we should have just a second motion on just the operating agreement rather than trying to revote the whole thing, which I will move approval of the operating agreement. Is that sufficient, Mr. Fehrenbach? Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Seeing the late hour once again, we'll take a 5-minute break right here. Please be back at 9:45. Welcome back. All right. First up, I'm going to make a motion here on closed session item 7.1. I'm going to move the closed session to date certain June 7th, out of respect for time this evening, as we're going to go along with the other agenda items. And I'll look for a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Nobody's going to oppose that.
Next item, item 6.1, consideration of the fiscal year 2023 budget, tax rate, and fee schedule resolution.
Mayor, could I just start off briefly? Can you hear me, Mayor?
Look, it's George. You muted George.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So just wanted to start off, thank you, Mayor and Council, for consideration of fiscal year 2023 budget, tax rate, and fee schedule resolution. I know there are some parts of the resolution where Council can have additional action, and Jill and Audrey will walk you through that. Before that, I just want to make a couple of comments about the budget. First, thank Council for all their work and attention on the budget process this year. Obviously, it's been a lengthy process. In hearing Council's comments last year, we tried to add additional presentations from directors on their departments, and hopefully that information was useful to the Council in their deliberation. We also thank the directors and their key staff for helping preparing the budget. This budget document is a lot of work for directors as they prepare their budget submissions, and also for not just for the work preparing the budget, but also for managing their departments with significant cost constraints. The City of East Lansing doesn't have all the resources we want to provide a government, and our department directors have to provide the most efficient and effective service they can within the resources that we have. So I thank you for thank them for their hard work, and also for their additional presentations this year. And finally, I want to thank the Finance Department, Jill Felposh under her leadership, Audrey Kincaid, Justin Geiger, and all the finance staff who helped actually prepare the budget document. It is about a 3.5 or 4 month process to get the budget from first starting in the beginning of December all the way to a budget document that you see before you that is presented to Council. And it really is shepherded by their process. They do lots of reviews with departments, lots of number crunching, and lots of editing and final drafting to put that document together. So thank you for the very high quality work product that they prepared. And with that, of course, we're available for Jill's presentation to walk you through the resolution and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, George. I will just echo his sentiment. It is a lot of work, and it's not just finance, it's every department. It's George, it's every director and their team. And then, of course, you guys get 2 months of deliberations and budget work sessions and extra long nights. So it really is, like they say, it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village to adopt a budget. So I do appreciate everybody's time and effort. And I will also just take a moment and say that I've enjoyed my time working here. And I know you guys are in good hands. I have a very good finance team. They will continue to do wonderful things. And, the same with every single employee in the city. I would say every employee does their best to serve the community. And that's the one thing I will miss about the city, right, is the people. That's the best part of this city is the people. And I truly will miss that, but I won't be far away. So I still plan on coming back and hanging out, but maybe not on Tuesday nights. So with that being said, I find it kind of interesting that my last meeting is the budget adoption, and it is nearly 10 o'clock or whatever time it is. But I do want to just walk through real quick what you have in front of you tonight. You have the resolution. The only difference between the resolution and the preliminary budget binder or document is the one fee related to ambulance transport, so that intra-facility transport fee. I think originally we had it at $1,500, and that's been reduced to $500. And then also in your packet is the Q&A from last week. And then finally in the packet is kind of a list of potential amendments that had been kind of thrown out there via email or at the meetings. And that really just provides the language that you can use if you want to propose an amendment to the resolution. So none of these on this potential amendment list are reflected in the resolution. So I just want to be clear on that. If you adopt the resolution as is, those potential amendments are not in there. So you would need to take action on each potential amendment if that's what you would like to do. We're also here, there's a team behind us, as always, that is here to help answer questions if you have additional questions.
I move the fiscal year 2023 budget, tax rate, and fee schedule resolution.
Second.
Discussion? Yeah. I'd be the person here to have a discussion on potential amendment. I'll look for the proper language around, particularly around the stuff around DE&I in the total budget. And I've thrown out some big numbers in this area because none of this is occurring in a vacuum. And I believe this work on culture, the work we're going to be doing on housing, and the stuff we got to do on workforce is tied directly into this, along with the fact that I think culture in this work can be the undoing of our community and the kind of the unraveling of it. I think it's important. I don't think we got the full thrust of that through the pandemic or anything else. We did a lot of internal cultural and values building and that type of thing, and I know there were some areas of export, and I think along with a lot of what's occurring both nationally and locally, there's going to be some areas of export that are going to be very necessary to take place through this process. So I'm looking to update or change the area of contract services and look to have 150K in the area of contract services for the fiscal year. So you can tell me how to amend that.
Is that in addition to what's already in there, or 150 total to that contract services
That'd be the new
line?
budget for contract services. Yeah,
So
new
that
number.
would be an additional 75,000, I believe.
Yep.
So we would want to amend the resolution by 75,000. So
Yep.
it would be amending Section 1, Schedule A, General Government, increased by 75,000. And then amending Section 2, Schedule A, General Fund, Reappropriated Fund Equity by 75,000. That was a lot, I'm sorry.
All right, do it again.
Okay, amend Section 1, Schedule A, General Fund, General Government Function to add 75,000. And amend Section 2, Schedule A, General Fund, Reappropriated Equity to add 75,000. And you can put for the purpose of additional DEI contract services.
You said Section 2, Schedule A,
Yes.
and what's the,
Section 1 is always general funds.
no, I get that.
Oh.
Just, what's the line item change on Section 2, Schedule A?
In Section 2 would be reappropriated fund equity.
Oh, okay.
So let's use the fund balance.
Okay, so is that an addition of 150,000 or?
75.
75?
That's my understanding. We already have 75,000 in the budget. My understanding is we want 150,000 total for that division.
Okay, so you're using it in Section 1, Schedule A, and reflecting that use in the reappropriated fund equity?
Correct.
In other words, we're removing it for fund equity to finance that change.
Correct. That's the revenue source.
I move that resolution. I move that amendment to the existing motion.
Who seconded?
I seconded it. Is it a friendly amendment?
It is now, at the moment.
So it's a friendly amendment, so you would both accept it, yeah.
I accept. Thank you.
Yeah, and just some commentary on that, kind of what the same thing I said for D and I, same thing I kind of said to Adam, being both kind of fledgling operations, looking for long-term plans on this so we can look at it year over year and the benchmarking work that we want to do going forward. And I think that's out to Director Hardy directly. I think that's crucial. We can't measure what we don't count. So we'll be looking to measure that, and the same thing for Adam's group and the kind of placemaking stuff you're doing as we're talking about extending out our view a little bit longer. That'll be critical for both these kind of fledgling operations. So,
And I'm assuming that to the extent we're budgeting that money, it's going to be subject to our bid process and everything else. So, along the same lines, I want to defer my suggestion about adding $1 million for additional supplemental pension payment. My understanding is that we can modify this budget as we go through the year, and I'm willing to defer that until we see how things develop here. So I have no further interest in that at this point in time.
Mayor, should I add in each of my potential amendments?
yeah.
I think, Dana, I think it's sufficient. We can ask Mr. Tribb. I think you can just say as written in the potential amendments. I don't know if you have to read every single one. Can we do it that way? It's just a lot of reading. But.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that should be fine. Just reference where exactly that's at within the,
It's on the digital agenda. It's on page 465, and I think you can just call them out by number, Dana, if you want.
Like number 2?
Mm-hmm. Like potential amendment 2, potential amendment 3.
I don't get what you're saying. There's a lot of numbers on here. So amend section 8 or just say
I think
amend?
To amend the, would you like me to move them?
Move one, and then if I follow you, I'd like to read
So
them.
I would move potential amendment to the fiscal year 2023 budget tax rate and fee schedule under potential amendments on page 465, potential amendment number 2 related to the non-resident daily passes at the Aquatic Center.
Is that correct?
Okay, so sorry. I thought you guys made it easy for me to just read it out loud, and I just want to make sure everything's covered. So it's to amend section 8, the fee schedule for Parks and Rec, Arts Fund, and that's under A. And then number 3, it's to amend section 8, the fee schedule for Parks and Recreation to reduce the 10-day visit fee pass for non-residents. And number 4 is to amend section 8, the Parks and Rec Fund for the Family Aquatic Center to reduce the season pass fees for non-residents by $10. And number 5 goes into something different, so I wasn't sure if I should, should I just read it out loud?
Go for it.
Okay. And so number 5 is to amend section 8, fiscal year 2023 Parks and Rec for the summer kids camp for the non-sibling fee for both residents and non-residents to be $190. And my final one is number 6, which is to amend section 8 of the fee schedule for the parking fund, parking rates by eliminating the pay later notice of $30. And I just wanted to remind everyone that that $30 has never been charged before. And when they talked about why that fee came up, it's like we're taking extra money from someone that maybe just lost their card or can't pay right now. And so like we're charging them as much as your bank might charge you to write a bad check or to not have the funds in your account. So I just think it's kind of unfair to make money off of someone that's having a bad day and just needs to pay later. And it's also my hope for these notices because the parking person, Kyle, had pointed out that people have a lot of options on how to pay. So my hope is that we're going to see it lower anyway with the people that need the pay later notices. But there's ways I think the city should be making money off of people, and then there's ways that I don't quite agree with. And so that's where a lot of these fee amendments are coming from. Thanks.
I don't know, are you making it as one motion for all of those?
That's what, that's what you guys told me to do.
Well, I'm with you.
I'm ready to separate them.
Yeah, I'm with you up until the last one. I'll support the first, I can't remember, I've lost count, but
Yeah.
I can't support the last one, so just so you know.
Okay.
Councilmember Babcock as the seconder has to accept them as well.
Is that a friendly amendment?
If we
Correct.
take the final one, if
Yeah.
Dana's willing to
Dana,
remove the final one,
I'm
then
asking
at this
Dana,
point
is
it's
that-
friendly.
Okay, and then I make another motion for the final part?
And then that has to be voted on since the
separate.
original mover is not
Okay,
in
sure.
favor of it,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, in that
Okay.
case, yes, I support the amendment.
Then we need to vote on that.
Yeah, I can't hear most of what you guys are saying, but, yeah, so the friendly amendment that was accepted was all of the Councilmember Watson proposed changes except for item number 6 on page 32 of the agenda, correct?
Yes.
So we have to move
Now we
and
have that
vote on that
as
separately.
accepted.
Yep,
The front, yeah, minus the $30.
yep.
So that's the motion on the floor right now, so that's what should be voted on.
Okay. And then Dana, if you want to move that
That's it.
final one again, it would be an unfriendly amendment, and then we would have to vote on the amendment before we could vote on the amended motion.
Okay, so we'll make it right now?
Yep.
Okay.
Is that
Correct.
right, Mr. Chip?
We don't have to vote on the friendly amendments that were accepted by the
No,
motion.
just if she wants to move the one that Mr. Brookover was not in favor of.
Correct,
Move
Right.
it separately.
Yep,
yes.
Yeah.
yep.
Do it, okay. I'd like to make a motion to amend Section 8 fiscal year 2023 fee schedule for the parking fund, parking rates by eliminating the pay later notice of $30.
Second, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion fails. Back to the original motion,
The amended motion.
your original amended motion.
Original amended motion, yep.
Discussion?
I was really excited at 4:30 this morning, or this afternoon, when I realized I didn't have a meeting in half an hour to have a 2-hour meeting before our endless meeting. So, anyway, I'm glad that budget season is over, but also proud of this document and all the work that's gone into it, and I look forward to voting on our amended budget.
Councilperson Babcock?
Are we talking about Councilmember Watson's
The other-
multi-prong amendment? The one
Right
that
now, we're
reduces
talking
the
about
fees.
the accepted
It's baked
amended
into the
budget
friendly.
resolution.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's all baked in.
Nothing.
Hearing no further discussion?
I just had something.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Councilor Swanson.
Jill, I just want to thank you for working with us. Understanding the budget and such huge numbers was really difficult. And you just break things down really well. You explain things really well. And I just appreciate you working with us, and you will definitely be missed. So just again, thank you. And I'm glad that we've survived, again, the budgeting sessions, and that I've got 2 years.
Hearing no further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Hearing none, motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, may I take a point of privilege?
Absolutely.
I also would like to thank Jill Feldposh, and I think there's only one way to do this for your years of service to the city. Thank you.
There's a lot of emotion in these meetings. This used to be really sanitary. Item 6.2, consideration of fiscal year 2023 Community Development Block Grant budget.
Someone say budget season was over, not quite yet.
Yours is a baby budget, man. It's like, it's the cute one afterward.
It is kind of a little cute one, isn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly.
Hi, Council. Thanks for having me today, and thanks for all your input on this budget so far. We've talked about it a few times in the public hearings. I know you all made some adjustments on it last week. We've reflected those. The biggest thing to point out is the day after we made those adjustments, we got our official entitlement for fiscal year 23. It is $485,069, which is $16,146 less than we had for fiscal year 22. So to kind of divvy up that and shave off that deficit that we're dealing with, I just kind of proportionally decreased all of the items accordingly. And if you look at the table on the agenda item report, you'll see that the highlighted column is the one that we'd be looking to approve, that just decreases each item proportionally. The couple of exceptions being the facility rental is staying the same. We just decreased a different admin charge a little bit more because that's a set cost. And then some of the admin charges on their capital area housing partnership, we focus those on the housing rehab project itself because the admin charges from CHP are also set charges. Happy to answer any questions you guys have. Thank you.
Questions?
I do have a question. Just about process. At some point, are you going to talk about maybe a different process than, this time?
I am happy to answer that question, just like a little bit more specific in terms of
go ahead.
CD advisory or...
Yeah, for the advisory group, because it came together in a short period of time, and it came together during a time where it was during a lot of people's work days, and that, the second day was a snow day, and so that was kind of confusing for some people. And then just some reflection again on the funds, who they're designated for, and who's sitting at the table. And I learned afterwards. I know that City Council approved the number of seats, but then it was interesting to have a Parks and Rec representative when a lot of dollars went back to Parks and Rec, and we didn't have that dynamic before. So just, I hope we can talk again in the future about how we can keep on working on how the Community Advisory Group does things.
Yes, absolutely. As I think we've discussed in the past, Councilmember Watson, we were kind of building the boat while we were sailing this year. So we're going to be reflecting, taking some time specifically on the meeting structure. We're going to be setting those dates well in advance and then asking people to join based on those meeting structures so that we don't have, because believe you me, on our end of things, it was sort of a bureaucratic nightmare scheduling those meetings. So just making it easier on everybody.
Very cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Seeing none, I'll look for motion.
I'll move approval of the fiscal year 2023 Community Development Block Grant budget.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next up, item 6.3, consideration of ordinance number 1514, an ordinance to amend section 44-372 of the city code regarding parking bureau schedule of fees. Fines. Tired.
Good. Different things though.
don't know, Council, if you need further discussion on this. I'm available for questions. We did a presentation a couple of weeks ago where we discussed the need to create a better incentive to incent people to not park at the meters all day, but rather to park in the parking structures. So that's what we're looking for here is a $10 increase in the parking fee, parking fine cost. And I can answer any questions.
Questions? Hearing none, I'll look for a motion.
I move we amend the ordinance for parking fines as stated in ordinance 1514, an amendment to ordinance section 44-372 of the city code regarding parking bureau schedule of fines.
I'll second. Discussion?
Death, taxes, parking fines in East Lansing, the trifecta.
Is that a comment?
Just saying, after my dad died, I was still getting parking tickets in his name.
Yes.
It's a very special East Lansing MSU experience.
Well known. Well known. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm going to be voting no. It seems like our parking fees increase substantially very quickly. And we got a list that included like this default fee that doubles a person's amount of money, basically, and then a 20% late penalty fee. And the 20% is not just applied to the base, it's applied to the base plus the default. And so again, everything escalates so quickly, and I just don't think the city should be making money and revenue off of certain things and certain experiences. And when I looked up City of Lansing rates, they don't increase at that same pace. So I'm going to be voting no on this one.
Councilperson Babcock?
This might be a good time to mention that, and I see our court administrator has left, but there is a parking ticket amnesty going on with the city, not related to this agenda item, but as long as we're all thinking parking, do not snooze, people.
Run, don't walk.
The much better half may have skibbled down to City Hall to resolve a few issues of his own. So anyway, just, there is a parking amnesty on it. It might suit your needs, so thank you.
Further comment? All right, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1. Next up, item 6.4, discussion of developing a grant proposal for Michigan Economic Development Corporation Rehabilitation and Placemaking Program and consideration of a letter of support.
Good evening, Council. We have been before you with some information concerning the MEDC RAP grant that we have signaled intent to apply for. What we're looking for this evening is approval of a letter of support for that grant application. We can go through a couple of slides here. And given the late hour, I will look to you for your questions. But this is a process. We already have secured a letter of support from the Parks and Recreation Commission, and I believe this goes to the DDA later this week. If you want to move forward 2 slides, please. We do have a very tentative rendering of the potential redevelopment of the farmers market. You can see that the existing basketball court will remain in this. This will be a permanent covered structure that allows for much greater programming throughout the year, throughout the week, throughout many hours of the day, and a very diverse
opportunity for offerings throughout. So this wouldn't just have to be limited to the farmers market. You could have all kinds of events and programming and classes and reservations and lots of opportunity in this space. A little bit about this grant. This is a $1 million grant from the MEDC for infrastructure with a equal match to the grant. We are still developing where that grant match would come from, and we would be coming back to you before you were bound by this grant, correct? So if we were fortunate enough to get the grant, we would still have to come back to council.
Hello, Director DeChambeau. So one of the things that happened at this park was there had been a not very great access ramp that went down the hill. It was not great, but now it's gone altogether. I don't see that in the plan. Is that coming back?
I would keep in mind that for this particular grant, this is just a phase of what we've talked about in terms of the revisioning of Valley Court. So when we originally came to City Council, we talked about doing a whole public process. We still intend to do that process for the entire space. This grant came up shortly after we had that discussion, this opportunity, and this is about what we think we can do within this budget. If we were able to do additional items, we would certainly look at that. But at this point, given the rendering that we have and what would be needed for this structure, this would be the focus of the grant dollars.
Okay. Just a friendly reminder, that remains a priority for me.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I understand that we're going in phases, but I very much want to see that done at some point. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Does this increase the amount of paving down there, this proposal here?
So there is a little bit of additional space for the vendors, which is needed. Currently, the way the space is structured, we have some drainage issues and we have vendors that are pulled off. You may have been down to the farmer's market. We have very big industrial mats that we put down because it gets very muddy. So there would be a little bit more of that. And then there's a little bit of increased parking as well in terms of the hardscape. We do have another rendering that we looked at, keeping the farmer's market in its existing space. And that one actually took more green space out of the equation. And so when we measured, this actually gives us more green space between those two renderings to have the actual structure. So the answer is yes, there is some more. This rendering secures more green space than keeping the farmer's market in its original location.
So can you still play baseball there? Or soccer?
Yes, there's still green space, yes.
So when you say, quote, a little bit more, end quote, what additional,
So this rendering goes as far as basically the limit of the playground that is currently there. So you still have the green space all the way to the east of that, into the north of that. And you can see just the tip of the tennis court up in the top of the rendering, so if that gives you some sense of where it is.
is this part and parcel of our, is this part of a submission to the state then, this rendering?
Yes. It would be for the grant proposal.
Is this an annual fund, or is this kind of a one-shot dollar fund?
It's ARPA money, it's a one-shot.
More questions?
I have some comments. I don't know if I have any questions. I think it is regrettable, and I wish that we had been able to do the full public process that we had kind of indicated was our preference. Every person that I've talked to has mentioned kind of improving the farmers market site. I have obviously not talked to every single person in town, and that's probably colored at least somewhat by my personal acquaintances. But I think ever since Meridian did their farmers market improvement out on the green there at the mall site, East Lansing has been looking east a little bit, and maybe with a little bit of jealousy. So I think it is likely that we would be doing improvements to the farmers market as part of that park envisioning process, just because that seems to be the direction that our community is heading, and this is a chance to compete for a very substantial grant. Obviously, if we don't get the grant, then it's back to the drawing board with the full community process. But I do think it's kind of an unmissable opportunity to apply for a once in a lifetime fund of money. I think, $1 million grants for placemaking come by very often. I don't think I might have only been in government since like 2016, but I've never heard of one. So, anyway. And I was also present at the Parks and Rec meeting when they kind of rehashed out the details of this, and there was some skepticism, definitely, about the amount of pavement, but I think on balance there was an agreement that it would be a very attractive public amenity that is desired. So those are my comments.
Thank you.
Just for clarification on the record, it's the $1 million, and we'll be coming back for $1 million dollar for dollar match on the.
Correct. And, well, I'll let Tom.
So essentially, the request tonight is to approve a letter that we've identified the funds and have the wherewithal to match the grant at $1 million. Our work from here to really June 2nd, when we have to apply, is to try to figure out, what we've identified the buckets that we will attempt to use to offset general fund monies as much as possible, and including, making a request to the DDA on Thursday, including looking at other grants, looking at, basically every pot of money that we have, CDBG, et cetera, et cetera. Ultimately, we need to be able to show during this grant that we have the financial acumen and at least one other source of funds, because that will give us the highest score in that category. And so that's what the letter of support indicates, and a similar letter of support from the DDA that will be considered on Thursday. That doesn't necessarily tie our hands to utilizing those exact monies. I think what happens is if we're selected, then there's a letter of interest that's created from the MEDC, and at that point we need to get into specifics about how the timeline of the redevelopment project will work, along with those financing mechanisms. So there's still, in some sense it's non-binding, because there's still an agreement that would need to happen with the MEDC to effectuate the funds. But tonight we're really looking for this letter of support to be approved so that we can include it in our submission with the most possible points possible. That makes sense.
Good sense.
Another question?
Yeah.
Thank you. So, as I'm looking at this, is that a driveway with parking spaces? Would those be used as parking spaces when the market was not in operation? Just curious.
Yes, they could be.
Okay.
There are lots of ways this can be used. We've even had discussions about it can be marked for another sports court. Currently the farmers market is on top of the basketball court, which serves as parking at times, and it's adjacent to a parking lot. So there are other options, but right now it is shown as extra parking, and it can be used as that.
Okay. Just curious. Thank you.
All right, so we have $1 million that we have to match somehow, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now we're talking about a $2 million project that we haven't had community planning on. correct? Okay, thanks.
That's correct. We've had streamlined community input on this, but we have not had the visioning process that we had imagined initially. Correct.
Seeing no further questions, I'll look for a motion.
It's getting late and I'm scrolling madly. I'm guessing there is proposed language. I propose we approve this letter and seek the grant funding. Which is probably the most inelegant motion I've ever made, but I'm
There's
looking
the
down the
motion.
table at you, Mr. City Attorney,
We have a motion on the
Right
slide.
there.
or Mayor Pro Tem.
Can you read the proposed motion on the screen, or is it too far away?
You know I can't read that. Like, come on,
I
I
left
need
my glasses.
quadrifocals to read that.
Okay, I think I can do it. Can I read it out as your
Please.
motion,
I
Councilmember
I would
Babcock?
be honored, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay. Motion to approve the letter of support for the MEDC Revitalization and Placemaking Grant submittal indicating the city matching funds available.
So well done, thank you.
Only a little bit of squinting.
Oh,
I'll second.
For the record, moved by Councilperson Babcock, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Gregg. Discussion?
I'm going to vote against this. I have great respect for the staff planning and the city manager in this, but I really think I believe Valley Court is sacrosanct. I think it's an unbelievable green space in the middle of a downtown that's now getting surrounded by larger buildings. And I think we make a huge mistake by venturing into something like this without doing conceptualization from the community. And so I'm going to vote against this, and frankly, I'm going to vote against anything that impugns on green space on Valley Court for as long as I'm sitting here.
All right, thank you. All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1.
Thank you.
All right. Item 6.5, consider resolution regarding entheogenic plants.
Good evening, Council. It was requested that I draft this resolution regarding entheogenic plants, and I know we've had a lot of discussion on it. I wanted to remind the Council of the memorandum that I wrote to you, which is an attorney-client privilege memo, so we won't be talking about the merits of it, but back on April 14th. And my high-level concerns are just that, again, this is not a resolution to modify our code to legalize something, because we can't. This is a violation of state and federal law. Many of these entheogenic plants are, and so this goes the alternative route of decriminalizing them, which really is just a direction to the ELPD to selectively enforce state and federal law. And that's where my memo really speaks to the potential legal consequences and liabilities that the city could endure from doing that, and from when this honorable body uses its power to determine which laws we should selectively enforce, whether it's the ones that are before us today or any others that it might do so in the future. And so that's certainly my concern, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, I have a question. So some people talked about there's been resolutions in place for like 3 years. So did you find other communities where there were legal consequences because of these type of actions?
I mean, it would be really difficult to see whether there was a direct correlation from a failure of our officers to enforce that subsequently led to actions that led to liabilities or that led to loss of life or anything like that. I did not find anything specific where there was passage of one of these resolutions that then resulted in litigation that directly resulted in liability, but I don't think that the liability or some of the forms of liability that I addressed would come about in that form of lawsuit.
Questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk again, Council. April 20th of 2021, we started getting a lot of communications from people asking us to rethink how we charge or what happens to folks that have and use entheogenic plants. And I'm just going to say the plants because that word is impossible for me. And I'm trying to not collide that with just saying psychedelics, because we're not talking about all psychedelics. The ask is plants, again, as someone stated, that comes from the earth. And so I understood that the need was there to think and reconsider what happens to people that are using in the criminal system. I do believe I am an ally of use. As people pointed out, it's healing. People who are addicted might still be able to use the plants and do better and heal better. I've met great individuals, I know great individuals who do well in our community, in our town, who use, and I don't think any of those people should be caught up in a criminal system. And as someone pointed out, there are plenty of other charges that can be placed on a person that's doing something criminally besides ingesting something from the earth. But I just, like I said, there were a lot of calls, a lot of comments. As we've gone into the epidemic, I've seen more information about PTSD and about, again, the use of plants. And so I became an ally, and I think it's great that other cities in the state of Michigan have passed these types of resolutions. And I also think it's a message on up to Ingham County prosecutor about where we stand or what we're thinking about what the police should be doing or charging or having issues with and what they shouldn't. And yep, that's my piece for now on it. And thank you, Councilmember Brookover, for suggesting that a resolution be thought about and that we just have a discussion and have a vote on it.
I have a few comments to add to Councilmember Watson's comments. I think, if you look at the language of this resolution that was very carefully prepared, thank you, Mr. Chubb, it's pretty apparent here that what we're really doing is sending a message. We're creating one more link in the chain for our advocates that have spoken so eloquently to us to approach the state about full legalization. I think you can see that similar to the way that marijuana has been legalized but is still illegal. And that system seems to be working out financially fantastically for very many people. I think we do have a problem in our culture of vilifying substances. Some of them are certainly dangerous. I would actually argue that alcohol is one of the more dangerous ones, but that's one that for some reason hasn't been lumped in with all of the other ones, or the ones that are vilified. This acknowledges the illegality of these plants under state and federal law. It also
has a resolution that it does not authorize or enable the commission of any crimes. I think it's pretty, it's been crafted in a way to show support for people who need to use these, but also to acknowledge that there's kind of a gray area in legality. So I'm comfortable voting on this. I think one of the things that stood out to me from the testimony that we heard is these are things that you could be in the possession of without knowing it. My kids pick mushrooms out of the yard all the time, and you guys all know that I'm a crazy artist. I use mushrooms for dyeing fabric, so I almost certainly have had psychedelics on my person without knowing that I do. So, that the same argument can be made. If you can be penalized for having something that you don't know what it is, then maybe we shouldn't be penalizing people who are carrying something that they're trying to use for medicine. So I'm comfortable voting yes on this. I will be voting yes on this. And I wanted to acknowledge our advocates that have brought this to our attention and have been working so passionately for their cause.
I would truly, genuinely thank the advocates. I truly appreciate what you've brought to this conversation and the stamina you've shown tonight and throughout this. My concerns are the same as the city attorney's, and I think, as some of you know from the previous meeting, when I was a public defender, I represented some young adults who thought marijuana was legal in Lansing when in fact it wasn't. And that's a pretty terrible experience for me and for them. And I can't vote for this because we can't legalize it for you. I commend your advocacy. But it's not quite our place. We can't accomplish what it is you've worked so hard for. And I worry that the collateral consequence is that we are picking and choosing which state and federal laws the police department will enforce. And this is not very elegant, and I apologize. But I really want to tell you how much I appreciate, how impressed I am by your work, and your coming here and telling us your stories, sitting through this meeting. I think that a level well beyond my knowledge, the science will catch up with what you're saying, and I will think of you all with pride and with admiration on the day that happens. Tonight, I can't give you what you want, but I do want you to know how impressed I am. Thank you.
Yeah, what I really liked is the conversation, and I think it is important around kind of self-agency. I thought that was a critical component of this conversation. I remember from some of the original conversations, a big part of this was, which is right up my alley, it requires certain systems and support systems and how you operate while working through this processes and having those proper systems. And I respect this community that does have those proper systems, but I'm also aware there's a separate set of communities out there, like any other thing, that will not in that framework. As far as this resolution goes, just me in general, I find it's well structured for a reason, but it ends up being very performative in a way, and it makes me fall in a little bit in the camp of my esteemed colleague on I don't like doing performative things that leave people in jeopardy. If we're going to do things performative or anti-performative, it needs to have teeth and create some type of action along with that. I think it creates new gray areas and different challenges along that. As far as the actual conversations around Eastern, Western, and the medicine and the benefits, all that, I think all that's very feasible and probably most of it obvious in a lot of ways for the curative properties and some of those other things outside of the research. I think the challenges are legal more than anything else, and that'd be my concern. That's been my concern the entire time. Very little to do with what you guys are presenting has been very compelling. My concern is the gray legal jeopardy that it creates, and that's kind of what's been sticking with me the entire time. And then I think furthermore, I think what marijuana did well early is the infrastructure around education and how its infrastructure was operating. It was building out infrastructure and things around different things, even with caregivers and different things like that. I think that's the language of change and process and structure that kind of doesn't jive well with the kind of self-agency part of it, which makes it kind of this separate thing, which is really difficult to build law around or anything like that. It's a very slippery and tricky conversation. So that's just kind of all what I took from that. But I do appreciate, and the testimonials are powerful and real. And I do understand, and I'm not prioritizing anything above this, but I see a great deal of jeopardy in this and just challenges. And I despise the gray area because it just creates one-offs and a whole bunch of things like that. So that's my reservations around this. So nothing to do with the actual applications or the medical viability or any of that part of it. I think it's been amazing, and the stories are amazing. So. No further comments from there. I'll look for a motion. I'm going to phrase the motion.
I'll move approval of policy resolution 2022-8 regarding entheogenic plants. Sorry, none of us can say that word.
Make someone say it.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion?
I did just want to add that there are trainings that are offered to therapists to support people during their use and during their time. And so I know you mentioned the caregivers and cannabis users and how that was in place. And also another interesting thing about use for these plants is a lot less people have used, and that's okay. More people, it was more relatable for cannabis people to say, yeah, I agree, because at some points they had tried or smoked or puffed or whatever. And this was a little different. And that's why, just again, I became an ally. And I became an ally, not because I'm a user, but because the information that comes in, it made sense to me to move on this. So that's my last comment.
It's a good one. And I'll revisit the part on self-agency. I'm a big advocate of self-agency, and the analogy on women's right to choose was a powerful analogy, and I appreciate that. And like I said, my reservations are on the legality, not on the rights of the individual. Thank you.
And I do think brain science is on your side. I think time and science are on your side. Just not the right forum, but really, the day I open the New York Times or hear on NPR that NIH has done this, I will picture your faces and I will smile and I will thank you and I will be very happy for you and happy for all you've done for everyone else. I'm sorry. I do think, though, the brain science really is going to be on your side. So, anyway.
Seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion fails 3-2.
Can I take a point of personal privilege before our advocates leave us? I understand there's a state bill moving through. Will you forward that information to council so that we can write letters of support? I appreciate that. Thank you.
And to that end, if you'd like me to draft a resolution to support, I'm happy to do that.
I'm going to go ahead and say yes, Mr. Chipp. I would appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, meeting adjourned.